Welcome to the March 5th meeting of the regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. For detailed information on meeting procedures, please review the full printed meeting agenda provided. Mux Kelly, will you please call the roll?
Can you make yourself louder?
Yes, I'll try to speak closer. Thank you.
Chair Lee.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Abrams.
Here.
Secretary Weish.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt noted as absent this evening. Councilmember Dish.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
And Commissioner Adams. Here. You have a quorum.
Great. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Commissioner Weatherby and seconded by Commissioner Mills. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those, any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 22nd, 2024? Moved by Councilmember Dish and seconded by Commissioner Mills. Is there any discussion of the minutes? May I, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Next up are reports of the Planning Commission and written communications. I will first go to staff. Any report from council? Councilmember Dish.
I, again, failed to prepare, but it was not a big meeting last night, and I don't remember anything. And I am getting a second from, yay, Mr. Leonard.
Gotcha. Thank you. Staff and Manager Leonard.
Yes, good evening, Commission. Two items that I want to draw your attention to. One, for the work session next Tuesday, we have a concept discussion for a site plan at 2854 South State. This is a little over 10 acres. It's a proposed mixed-use development. It's the site of the 777 building and ProQuest building. This would be a pretty large-scale proposed development in our TC1 district, so they're going to be coming to the Planning Commission. I am also going to be recommending that that's the only item on that agenda, that we alter the starting time of that work session to 8 o'clock. The reason for that is to give all of you a little bit more cushion for the first and members of the public of 3 dates of public workshops that will be held next week. We are doing a series of joint public workshops at the downtown library. The workshops will be held on Tuesday, March 12th at 4 o'clock to 7:30 with a presentation at 6 o'clock p.m. On March 13th from 10:30 a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m. and on Thursday, March 14th, 2 sessions, 10:30 to 1 o'clock p.m. and then 4 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. with a presentation at 6 o'clock p.m. At all these workshops, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to learn more and provide feedback on multiple city planning initiatives. One is, of course, the comprehensive plan. The second is the downtown area circulation study and also the Downtown Development Authority development and TIF plan. So we're really excited to provide this kind of 3-in-1 opportunity for the public.
Thank you. Do other commissioner officers or committee liaisons? Commissioner Abrams.
I just wanted to report as the chair of the Ordinance Revisions Committee that we did not meet last week. The meeting was postponed to allow us to have more time to have a substantive discussion about zoning. So we will meet again in May. And just a reminder that our monthly meetings are now every other month to make room for comprehensive plan subcommittee. Thanks.
Thank you. Do other committee liaisons have anything to report? Seeing none, written communications are included in today's packet. We're going to move on to agenda number 6, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about an issue that is not listed on this agenda. So if you will have an opportunity to speak on every single agenda as they come up. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants to speak during this public hearing remotely. Please press *9 if listening by phone or use the raise hand feature if you're viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID number 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers who've raised their hand using the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name if available. You'll hear an automated announcement saying that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area and turn off any television or background noises so that we can hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to address the commission? Yes, please.
Thank you. I want to first thank all of you for your work and leadership with the city and for letting us come and speak today. My name is Brian Donovan. I actually don't live in Ann Arbor. I live in Highland Park, Michigan at 206 Moss Street. But I work in Ann Arbor. I'm the general manager for the Intercooperative Council, which is a student housing cooperative. Got started in 1932, and we incorporated in 1944 to buy our first building. Today we own 19 properties in and around the University of Michigan with houses in all but one of the different council wards. Monthly charges for our 550 members who live in our properties range from $493 for a shared room in North Campus to $1,370 for a two-bedroom apartment on Kingsley. And all contracts include utilities as well as high-speed internet. Affordability is a top priority for the ICC, and we know it's important to the people of Ann Arbor too. We have researched how several cities enable group living cooperatives like us to prosper and grow, that we will share with you their zoning and use codes from those cities. We're also interested in innovations that provide permanent or very long-term affordability for residents, whether they're living together in a large house or not. And I want to particularly highlight work done in Washington, D.C., Austin, Texas, and Cincinnati, Ohio. In Washington, D.C., the Tenant Opportunity for Purchase Act has been in place for 40 years, and it requires notice when a landlord is going to sell a property to the tenant, with the tenants have a chance to put together a bid. There's more than 16,000 properties that have been, affordable properties that have been created or preserved through the TOPA in the last 40 years. The second one is the University Neighborhood Overlay. This is in Austin. It started in 2004. It's their most successful affordable housing program, providing more units than all of their other programs combined, all for students. It's an optional upzoning that requires long-term affordability as well as a fee in lieu if you don't go to more deeply affordable units. The last thing I want to mention is from Cincinnati. It's called Renter Equity. It's developed by renting partnerships. They put it together when they were managing a low-income housing tax credit project, and it's a property management system that allows tenants through tenure and participation in maintaining the building and attending meetings for the organization to build equity, and they can earn up to $10,000 over 10 years if they pay on time and do all of their work. All of this is actual savings, so they're budgeting for regular property management costs, but because they're not turning over and helping out, they get a share of that money. So we're interested in the comprehensive planning process and excited to be able to share with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Brian Pagan. I'm a resident of 1507 Washtenaw Avenue, which is also known as Sojourner Truth Cooperative House. It's in Ward 2, a student-run cooperative house, part of the Intercooperative Council. And as my colleague mentioned, the ICC is a cooperatively run nonprofit housing corporation where the members own and collectively manage the operations of the organization. We collectively set utility charges and provide services to our members. It's a place where people can become cooperative leaders and stewards of their community, and where you not just buy a place to live, but you buy a place into a community and into a larger cooperative vision. Years ago, I joined the ICC in order to complete my undergraduate at U of M, and I stay in the ICC now because I want to continue to contribute to the cooperative movement, and I want to help steward its growth. However, in the pursuit of our mission, we face many real challenges. The current zoning code makes it difficult for the ICC to steward our properties and continue to expand. Student cooperatives are not permitted in any residential zones except by a special exemption use in either the R2B or R4 zones. To get an SEU within these zones, there must be 8,500 square feet of lot area, 5,000 square feet of floor area, and 350 square feet of lot area per occupant. Many of our properties have been grandfathered into their neighborhoods. 9 of the 18 ICC-owned properties are non-compliant with the zoning code, disallowing us from prolonging the lives of our houses. And each year, as our houses get older, it becomes more and more important that we're either able to make the necessary changes to prolong their lives or to purchase new properties. And in order to do so, we ask that you consider the following recommendations. To bring the existing ICC properties into zoning compliance, we recommend eliminating the minimums for lot size and square footage for student cooperative and housing uses for the R4C zone. And to enable ICC expansion and densification, we recommend permitting student cooperative housing in residential zones by right. This will put the ICC on a level playing field with investors and absentee landlords, as the ICC has to endure extra costs and delays to be allowed to provide affordable units in residential zones. And the ICC also requests to be permitted to operate group housing in R1, R2A, and R3 zones near the university and transit hubs. And we also strongly encourage the city to eliminate the maximum number of unrelated people that share a unit in-house. Thank you all for listening to our considerations today, and we look forward to working with you all as an organization in the comprehensive planning process.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak? Welcome.
Hello, I am Alex Zittelman. I live in Ward 2 on Washington Avenue, also at Truth House, in the ICC. And though the ICC is primarily made up of U of M undergraduate students, we also serve many graduate students, students from WCC and Eastern, and non-students. The ICC has also begun identifying and prioritizing applicants who demonstrate financial need during contract signing. The ICC and house charges typically amount to about $820 a month for socialized housing, utilities, groceries, and educational and leadership opportunities. We also provide need-based charge reductions to those who qualify. And I'm speaking with you all tonight to share our struggle to expand affordable housing options in Ann Arbor. So historically, the ICC is expanded by purchasing single-family homes and student rental properties and internally densifying them as group housing. However, about half of our properties are grandfathered as they are not compliant with the current zoning use standards set for student cooperatives, primarily floor area and lot size minimums, set in place so that way we may only operate homes that resemble large Greek life houses. We can't operate a new non-compliant property with more than 6 unrelated residents, making many expansion opportunities infeasible if we wish to remain below the market rate. And we're also unable to find new properties to expand into that meet our zoning use standards as group living, and are routinely forced to reject opportunities to expand into non-compliant properties on the market. Even if we were to find a compliant property, conditional use requirements force us to jump through additional hoops and expend resources before even knowing if we'll be allowed to operate a new property. And if these zoning restrictions had existed in 1930, then we would have never been established or exist today. So we do have a list of asks to make our properties compliant and to make our expansion feasible, namely eliminating the minimum size requirements for our zoning use, eliminating the maximum number of unrelated residents who can live together in a home, and also investigating the University Neighborhood Overlay Ordinance from Austin, Texas, to collect fees and lieu to support affordable student housing, and to investigate the Tenants Opportunity to Purchase Act from Washington, D.C. to give tenants the right of first refusal to purchase their home from their landlord. I've passed out info packets to everyone with more information for you all. Would love to meet and talk more about this and answer questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak to the commission? All right, do we have any remote callers?
There's one hand raised. Phone number ending in 534, you have permission to address the Planning Commission.
Good evening. This is Tom Stolberg, calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor. The PUD or not the PUD? That is the question. PUD is a useful tool in our zoning code, the UDC. It can be used or abused. Later this evening, we will discuss the rezoning from C1AR to PUD. But for now, let's review some of the uses and abuses. Here's a quote. PUD should not be used when there is an appropriate zoning category, and in this case, there is one, C1AR, end quote. No, I'm not talking about the Five Corners application on Packard Street on tonight's agenda. Councilmember Lisa Dish said that on September 5th, 2023. It was about the application for Southtown on South State Street. She was correct on the first half of that statement and incorrect in the second half. But that was only one of many errors that led to that project inappropriately being approved as C1AR with variances and conditions. Had the exact same project been approved as a PUD, we would be getting 33 units of affordable housing or about $3 million in affordable housing funds. Perhaps later tonight, Lisa Dish will reconcile that statement with tonight's application. Consistency is vitally important in zoning law. I won't go into all the details right now, I don't have time, about how the city helped the developer cheat the Affordable Housing Fund out of $9 million, or 93 units, by mimicking a PUD at Lower Town in 2017. I will remind people that voices were very loud then, claiming PUDs were not viable. So just a month or two later, the city approved a PUD nearby, and that contributed about $500,000 to the Affordable Housing Fund. Consistency is vitally important in zoning law. There were two other projects that were approved later as PUDs in that area, both providing affordable housing units or dollars. Then there was the inappropriate use of a PUD at 415 West Washington. Let me read you a citation from the UDC that I raised when that was up about a year ago. With regard to 415, the UDC says that a PUD shall not be allowed where it is sought primarily to avoid the imposition of standards and requirements of other zoning classifications or other city regulations. And cite the article on that. We have been very inconsistent with using and abusing or inappropriately avoiding PUDs. We need to reconcile our mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other remote callers?
There are no other hands raised at this time.
Thank you. With that, I will close out public comment on section 6. We're going to move on to agenda number 7. This is the public hearing scheduled for the next business meeting. Staff?
There's no public hearing scheduled at this time. The Tuesday, March 19th, 2024 regular session has been canceled. The reason for that is because we're working through details with petitioners, of which we do have many active petitions, but we want to bring clean proposals to the table without the need for adding conditions to your motions. So to give us time to do that, we made some decisions to cancel tentative items. So there are no public hearings at this time.
Thank you. Moving on to section 8A, which is unfinished business. There are none. So we'll move right on to regular business. I'm going to introduce a petition. This is 503 Miller Avenue, special exception use for Planning Commission approval. This is a request to allow a child care center limited to 47 children and 15 staff. The existing 3,200 square foot structure is to be renovated and no new development is proposed. The site size is 8,447. The zoning designation is R2A, two-family dwelling, and the staff recommendation is approval. We will move on to petitioner presentation with Etta. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Etta Heisler. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Apple Play Schools. I'm here with Bob Overheiser of Architects Design Group, Ted Hirsch of Midwestern Consulting, Mr. Tom Myrie representing New Hope Baptist Church, the building owner. And from Apple Play Schools, I'm joined by Jeff Wilkerson, the chair of our board of directors, as well as Brittany Murillo, our development and communications coordinator, who's sharing some images online. Our nonprofit organization, Apple Play Schools, currently operates 3 licensed early childhood centers in Ann Arbor, including Manzanita Spanish Immersion Play School and Green Apple Garden Outdoor Immersion Play School, as well as Apple Scouts Community Immersion Summer Camp program. We're requesting approval of special exception use to open and operate a child daycare at 503 Miller Ave, shown here at the corner of Miller and Chapin Street. 503 Miller, as Wanmu stated, is currently zoned R2A, and special exception use was granted previously to operate an adult daycare and community health clinic at this site. We have been operating child care center under a similar special exception use just down the street at 511 Miller Avenue since 2014. If SEU is approved, our plan is to renovate the existing building at 503 Miller to bring it up to code, particularly state code regarding fire, safety, and egress for child care centers, and provide 47 new child care spots with approximately 10 to 15 adult staff present daily. We've worked with the landlord, New Hope Baptist Church, for nearly a decade. When we started exploring ways to better meet the dire need for childcare in our community, the church leaders recommended we renovate the building and put it back to use for the community after sitting mostly unused for several years. Several key businesses are located right on this corner, which anchors the neighborhood: Knight's Market and Big City Small World Bakery, as well as the church, which has decades of leadership in the community. And we believe a childcare would add to that. For Apple Play Schools, 503 Miller's proximity to these businesses, as well as to West Park, Argus Farm Stop on Liberty, the Farmers Market, Miller Nature Area, the downtown library, means we have bus and walking access for children to be out in the community. Being immersed in community is an essential part of our curriculum as a Reggio Emilia-inspired center, but it's also just good for kids. There's ample off-street parking both in the auxiliary lot we currently use just to the south of the property and across the street at New Hope, which is accessible by the crosswalk across Chapin at Miller. And there's proximity to several different public transportation lines, as well as the future Tree Line Urban Trail, which support both the city's and Apple Play Schools' sustainability goals. This location is accessible readily to the families and staff we serve. Currently, 20% of our families and staff at the 511 location bus, bike, or walk to school. We plan to add at least 6 Class B bike parking spots at our sister site, 511, as part of this project. And at our citizen participation meeting, we heard concerns from neighbors about the noise during our weekday business operations. And to address this, we will include some plantings and have other ideas to create visual and sound buffer between the outdoor play areas and the neighboring properties. And we're happy to consider other input as we figure out how best to be good neighbors. We're required to install a new hydrant for these operations as well, as indicated in our plans, and we plan to run the lines for the hydrant off or across Chapin Street. Thanks, Brittany. Before I end, I want to provide some important context for the project and our special exception use request. In addition to my work at Apple Play Schools, I also serve on the Livingston-Washtenaw Child Care Planning Coalition, which formed last year to study the child care crisis in our area and develop solutions for our community. And I don't use the words child care crisis lightly. Here in Washtenaw County, there are only enough licensed child care spots for 1 out of every 7 children under the age of 5. Only 40% of families in our area have access to child care that meets their needs, and child care costs here are the highest in the state. Families are paying more than $10,000 a year per child to have the care that they do have, even if it doesn't meet their needs. This lack of child care is keeping people out of work and impacting their earning capacity over time. At best, this is a seismic loss to our local economy. In fact, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce estimated last fall that Michigan loses nearly $3 billion in economic activity every year due to lack of childcare. At worst, this crisis widens the already massive gap in racial and gender equity by pricing caregivers of color and women out of childcare services, and thus out of opportunities to work, to advance their careers, or to build assets for their families. Meanwhile, childcare workers in Washtenaw County earn a median wage of $12.23 an hour, a startling $34 below living wage. That's just not good enough for professionals who are providing skilled labor that the rest of the community depends on to work. The childcare we propose to open at 503 Miller will not only provide more childcare spots and allow us to increase scholarships to the community, but it will also allow our organization to continue improving compensation to our teachers, creating high-quality jobs, and attracting new childcare education talent to our area. With over 40% of Ann Arbor households falling below the ALICE threshold, expanding childcare access and prioritizing childcare workforce development are essential steps that we must take towards meeting the city's goals for equity and economic development. Thank you so much for your time and for considering our request for special exception use. We look forward to answering any questions you may have about the project.
Thank you. Moving on to staff presentation, Ms. Thatcher.
Thank you.
We will do public comment right after staff presentation. Thank you. Ms. Thatcher.
I'm going to put back on your screens the aerial photo of the site. This is the one that's in the packet. But I wanted to briefly touch on a couple of things. There's no off-street parking required by code on this site. Nevertheless, it has a lot of parking, and since it's got it and they use it, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of it. So this is 503 Miller on the corner. This is a privately owned residential home next door, and next door is at 511 is an Apple Play School's existing preschool. They use the empty lot at 515, which is over here, as their playground. It's a little bit hard to see here, but 515 wraps all the way around the back of 511 and the neighbor 507, and abuts here the 503 Miller that's at the corner that we're talking about tonight. There's a small parking lot right behind 503 Miller that is not proposed to be used for parking. I assume that will be used for kids, for a playground area. Right now, parents and caregivers are going into the parking lot down here that's owned by New Hope Baptist Church that abuts West Park, a little bit farther to the south. You can park here where you see these cars parked and walk right up this path through the back to get to Apple Play School's the existing location. So this is really convenient to keep kids off the street as much as possible. There are also, however, good sidewalks in front of, along Miller and along Chapin. There are marked crosswalks at the intersections. So really, in terms of both parking drop-off and pedestrian friendliness, this is a pretty good site for that. We should, let's see, we should note that at the citizen participation meeting, there were three members of the public who attended. I'm not sure if they were all neighbors or just some of them. There were noise concerns raised, and the owner or the occupant of the house that would be sandwiched in between the two preschools had some concerns about adding more kids to the mix. This is a pretty busy street, Miller. There's quite a bit of traffic. It's very close to Spring Street, where we have Knights and a bakery, and the church is right down here. So there's a lot going on this corner. And I've talked to representatives of Apple Play Schools, to Etta, who presented to you tonight. She has assured me that they want to keep working with the neighbor that would be in between the two preschools and do what they can. They've already taken some steps to mitigate some noise that they had going on, and they're looking at what else they can do. That's not codified on this, of course, but we have had those conversations. Meeting the SEU standards for approval. Like I said, this is a pretty intense neighborhood, and I don't think that this is out of character with that neighborhood. Turning movements will remain unchanged. The last thing that I want to talk about is bike parking. There's no development proposed with this, so there's no site plan. There are sort of civil engineering plans attached only as for information, because we ask for some sort of existing conditions plan with an SEU that doesn't have development proposed. So as such, there isn't bicycle parking required on the site, but I strongly suggested that they provide it because they do have people that bike now to their site, and they were very amenable to that. Took an inventory of both sites and thought that the best place to put it would be behind the existing preschool, but to be shared by both preschools if the new one is approved. It is on the existing conditions plan that they would provide this by September of 2025, after they get the 503 Miller in better shape. And there would be 6 Class B spaces there shared between the two. It's a little bit strange to put your bike parking on a different site that you don't own, but since this is a special exception use, I don't think that it's detrimental, since they'll be using both properties and going between the two quite freely. Should somebody else want to occupy this building that we're talking about tonight in the future, and their special exception use says you have to go to 511 Miller for bike parking, obviously that's not going to work. At that point, we would have to update the special exception use or just have them provide it on the 503 Miller site, the Class B spaces that are required. And who knows what will be required by that time. We might want to update the whole thing. So staff does recommend that the special exception use be approved with conditions. The conditions are that the child care is provided for no more than 47 children and no more than 15 caregivers, and that the 6 Class B bicycle parking spaces will be provided by September 30, 2025 at 511 Miller for shared use with 503 Miller. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will move to public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about this particular item. We'll first call on people that are present and then on to the remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. And for phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name if available. You'll hear an automated announcement saying that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area so that we can hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And with that, is there anyone present that would like to address the commission? Please.
I thought the 3-minute limit was only for things that were not on the agenda, but.
Oh.
My name is Lori Lounsbury. I live at 507 Miller Avenue. I have nothing against children. I have 2 of my own and 3 grandchildren. But this location will add, they already have 30 children on one side of me, and I don't know how many teachers. This will put almost 100 people all the way around me. If you looked at the map they had, they're going to have the children playing behind my house. That means 100 people completely surrounding me all the time. As it is right now, I can no longer use my backyard. They like to have the kids outside all year long, which I'm good with having kids outside, but I can't use my backyard. It's so loud. They're little kids, they're little tiny kids screaming and yelling all the time. The teachers are loud too. My biggest problem is that I bought this house 20 years ago. This is all I have. This is my life savings. This was my retirement plan, to stay there and let the equity appreciate. This will immediately destroy all the value in my house. No one would buy a house wedged in between 100 people. 100 people, 70 of whom will be loud children. So I will be ruined, devastated. I will lose everything I have with this. Everything. I did my due diligence when I bought my house. That house next door did have a special exception permit for an adult daycare. I don't think that ever went to fruition. If it did, I never saw a person coming and going. When I bought my house, the daycare next door was for 6 or 8 little children. It wasn't a big deal. Then Apple came in, and it immediately became 30 kids outside all year long. Chapin Street is extremely narrow. I've seen so many cars get sideswiped on that street. I've seen a city bus sideswipe cars on that street. I've seen the neighborhood with Miller Manor. That corner is kind of unsavory, and I think we all remember a woman got murdered 100 feet from this place. These little children, I'm all for playing outside, like I said, but in the summertime, they play out there in full view of West Park or any of the people walking around there, and they are wearing nothing but their little underpants. Boys and girls out there in the summer, that seems like a formula for trouble, big trouble. They're outside all the time, all the time. They are always making noise. Their website says it's an outdoor immersion exploring natural landscapes. Etta said something about the community and being in the neighborhood. I've never seen them leave there. This will ruin me. This will destroy me. Ruin me. My house won't be worth anything.
I'm sorry, your
20
time
years,
is up.
I'll be
ma'am.
done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to address the commission about this particular topic? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Frances Todoro Hargreaves. I am the Impact Investing Manager for the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation. The Impact Investing Program has been in the foundation for about 3 years. The committee has 3 priorities that it's set for itself. It's affordable housing, small business, and childcare. And as part of that childcare focus, I have also participated in the Livingston Washtenaw County Child Care Coalition that Ms. Heisler spoke of. We communicate and keep up to date with decisions in Lansing on how to handle this crisis. And we have been working with the team at Apple for the last 4 months on this project. The committee is supportive of this project, and so we're hopeful that you will be also, and we look forward to working on this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission at this time? Is there anyone remotely that is looking to address the commission?
There are no hands raised.
Okay. Give it a few more moments. Okay, seeing no other, I'm going to read the proposed motion, which is the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, including an accompanying site plan, and finds the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.29.5.d, Special Exception Use, and Section 5.16.2.b, Child Care Center, and therefore approves the 503 Miller Special Exception Use for Child Care at 503 Miller Avenue. This approval is based on the following findings. The proposed use will be consistent with the R2A multiple family dwelling district, which allows single and two-family residential uses and child care centers by special exception. Proposed use will not adversely impact traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, or road intersections based on the location. Miller Avenue and Chapin Street provide access to the site, and the proposed use is consistent with the existing and other surrounding uses' traffic impact. The subject site meets this use-specific standard of at least 7,500 square feet of lot area. And finally, the site plan documenting the existing and proposed conditions of the site plan has been submitted as a part of the application. The special exception use approval is based on the following conditions. Childcare is provided for no more than 47 children by no more than 15 caregivers. 6 Class B bicycle parking spaces will be provided by September 30th, 2025 at the 511 Miller for shared use with 503 Miller. And that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan, which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exception use standards, as no development which would otherwise require site plan approval have been proposed. Moved by Commissioner Mills and seconded by Councilmember Dish. We are in discussion. Would anyone like to kick us off? Commissioner Adams.
Yeah. So the legal standard for something like this relates a lot back to impact on the neighborhood, its compatibility with the neighborhood. So this is my neighborhood. I think the expansion of this project isn't just compatible with it. I think it's going to be the center as expanded is going to meet a dire need for neighborhood childcare in this neighborhood. Beyond that, I think that the adverse impact on neighbors here has to be viewed in the context of, two streets that support a significant amount of daily traffic, a very vibrant park that's right behind the property, a corner grocery store, a bakery, a dispensary, a church. I mean, this is a very active, as staff pointed out, a very active and busy neighborhood. In that context, I think the incremental noise increase that we're talking about really falls into the same category as the stuff that's already there. So when we're talking about consistency and impact, I really feel like this use is very consistent with what's already present there, and I fully support this, and I'm excited to vote yes on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Dish.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you to staff because the staff report does a great job with its table checking off the UDC requirements that are met by this project, and I'd like to elaborate on the first of these, which is consistency with objectives of the comprehensive plan. And as staff notes, the proposed child care center provides an essential service for those living and working in the city. It is not an exaggeration. It is actually empirical fact that Washtenaw County is considered a child care desert. There is only one licensed spot available for kids 1 to 5. And this is what should really give us all pause, that close to 20% of the licensed spots are sitting empty because people cannot hire staff because child care wages are so low. Apple Play pays its staff over the median wage of Washtenaw County. They pay them close to $16 an hour. They also provide 50% infant and toddler and 50% preschool care. Their expansion that they are bringing before us is necessary for them to be able to continue paying at what is almost a living wage, and yet we are happy about it, and that they are able to continue to provide that kind of ratio. Many places just cannot afford to provide infant toddler care because it is so expensive to do so. And so without this expansion, they are not able to continue this important service of offering infant and toddler care. This is not merely, these issues of childcare are also issues of equity because they hit women and women of color hardest. So in terms of the crucial services that this childcare center will provide, I think that the project checks those boxes. I have immense sympathy for the frustration that Ms. Lounsbury expressed. I cannot imagine that Apple Play School wouldn't be willing to talk to you about noise mitigation. We already have in the staff report evidence that they have responded to concerns about a piano on the front porch by moving that. So I bet there are ways to talk about that. I also can't imagine any house in Ann Arbor having no value. So I understand that there may be a loss, but there may also be, there are many gains.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills, I think you were next, or unless Commissioner Weatherby.
This is not my neighborhood, but my niece and nephew went to Wee Wisdom, which was in 511 Miller back in the day. One's now in college, one's a senior in high school. And this was a fabulous spot. It was just so amazing. Their parents could walk them to and from school. If something happened, we could rush in because we worked downtown at the university. It was just a really great spot. And it's very exciting to see more opportunities there for childcare because it is a huge problem. And the thing that is most dangerous for our kids is driving them everywhere. And to be able to be in a neighborhood where not everybody would have to drive their kids and drop them off and leave them, have big lines of cars. I love the bike parking. I think that's a really important piece. I am sympathetic to loud children. I live in a neighborhood where the children are older, but they are still loud, and they are loud later at night. But it's our community, and that's our society, and we have that, and our houses have gone up in value no matter what. Sometimes you might think, how could a house next to a terrible student house go up in value? And yet they've doubled in value. And so I am sympathetic. I know that's not going to help that we're sympathetic, but I think that this is a great location for a childcare and an expansion that is, it's on a park. It's just in a really great space, and it's been used as a childcare center for, the area has been childcare centers for a long time. So I think it's great. I did have one question for staff. Do we need to add the fire hydrant to the motion, or is that just part of it?
We do not. The fire hydrant is required by building code.
Okay.
And so the fire marshal's taking care of that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Mills.
This is my neighborhood. I looked at Apple Play School, and I actually have a question about how the two centers will operate. My children are blessedly now in elementary school, so I'm not paying for daycare. But I remember that I would need to take them to two different centers because of the age gap. So is the intention, age-wise, how will this operate?
I so wish the intention was to consolidate infant, toddler, and preschool care on one site so people didn't have to drive up and down Miller Road, but sadly that is not the intention. No, the intention is that the new center at 503 Miller will be only for children 30 months and older. That's for two reasons. One is because of the state child care licensing rules and fire safety and egress. It's not appropriate to have infant toddler care in most of the spaces at 503 Miller because of what's required to make sure that kids who can't walk can be moved safely by their caregivers out in the case of a fire. So to sort of alleviate any issues around state licensing, we decided to stick to 30 months and older there. The second reason is because, as Councilmember Dish mentioned, we currently provide infant toddler care at the building up the street as well as at Manzanitas that constitutes 50% of our enrollment, and the margins on infant toddler care are negative. We run those spots at a loss in order to accommodate the community's need, and the tuition we can charge for the older spots will allow us to offset that cost, spread our overhead among more families in order to better compensate our staff.
Great. Well, I can speak from experience. The need for childcare is great. It would have saved me from, one of the reasons is we tried to not drive and couldn't handle both drop-offs on bike. That's a hill to go up on. But anyway, even so, I think one of the things that's great about this site is the complementarity of the parking with the church use. In terms of using the infrastructure, the time that it would be used are always off-peak, right? And so even if there is a church event kind of in the middle of the day, that's not during drop-off time. So again, I'm literally just across the park in Lurie Terrace's backyard. And so I can see what's going on, how often that parking lot is full. And it's super complementary in terms of those uses. And in terms of a neighbor, right, it's silent at night. Kids go home, and on the weekends. And also, that's complementary with the church use. So I think this is a great use of the infrastructure that we have. This is like the hub of kind of the Lower Water Hill neighborhood. There's a hub of activity here, and so and bus stops just across the intersection at Chapin. So I think that this is appropriate. As the staff report points out, I think it meets all the criteria. The question that I have, and this I think is for staff, is in the UDC there's a 1,000-foot spacing from a dispensary to a private school. And I'm curious if this counts or not.
This does not count because the dispensary is already there.
Okay.
So a childcare can open within that 1,000 feet, but a new dispensary, say on the other side, would have to then be 1,000 feet away from the new childcare.
Right. Is this going to put the dispensary?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Childcares are not counted the same way schools are. You don't have to be 1,000 feet from a childcare.
Okay. I
apologize.
couldn't remember if daycare counted as
Yeah.
Okay.
It's elementary and up.
Well, and I would just say, again, my kids are in the park all the time. Like, this is a happening place to be, and actually the more activity that we have, like, I like the activity that's on the street. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't putting another special exception use in a weird spot in case there was a conflict, and it sounds like there's not. So great. I'm excited to see this.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, I just want to express that I'm looking forward to supporting this. And thank you for bringing more childcare to Ann Arbor. I know from experience that we very badly need it, and it's very difficult for childcares to get to a scale where it's profitable to expand, so thank you for doing that. Also, I just think it's a great location. It's right by a public park, and children, I strongly believe children have a right to exist in the city, use our public amenities, and I think it's wonderful that you have the children outside. That's an absolutely fantastic amenity, and I think it's really a matter of perspective, whether it's benefit or not, on a personal level for the homeowners. But I would say that, again, we're fortunate enough to live in a city where property values are pretty stable, and there will, be a market for that. So, well, I guess I can be sympathetic to neighbor concerns on that. Children do have a right to exist in the city. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner White.
Just a question for staff about, I was looking up the property ownership. It looks like the church owns
Yes,
503, 511, and 515?
that's correct.
Okay, so then the property that they're sharing across 503 and 511 actually run from 515 across and back, according to your staff report lines.
Let me look at the map.
Sorry.
Make sure I got the numbers straight.
And I guess I just have a general question about the need for because the church is not operating it and they're leasing the space, that's why it's coming in, because the church would have flexibility to do what they wanted to in that space within certain restrictions.
The church would also need a special exception use to operate a church-based childcare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? All right. With that, I'll just add my 2 cents. I was at a Spark Economic Development meeting a few days ago, which we did talk about the lack of childcare and the impacts that it has on talent attraction as well as retention. I certainly hear you as far as the frustrations with respect to noise bordering on what could be considered nuisance. Looking at the overall context of the concept of economic development as well as the other commissioners eloquently put, children do have a right to place in our city as well. I'm in support of this overall in consideration. That being said, I would also say that your particular property is also prospectively also possible for a special exception use as far as conversion goes, but that's neither here nor there. All of that said, I'm in support, and I think any other commissioners with final thoughts? With that, we'll go to a roll call vote. Thanks, staff.
Commissioner Adams.
Support.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Weish.
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
And Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
That passes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to regular business. This is 416 Longshore Drive Site Plan for City Planning Commission approval. I will give a quick, this is a proposal to construct a new 4-story, 15-unit condo building next to an existing office building. The site size is 1.66 acres. Zoning designation is office. Due to a noticing error, this petition is requested to be moved to the April 2nd, 2024 meeting agenda. We will still hold a public hearing since it was posted, but we'll be renoticing and holding a new hearing on April 2nd. I need a motion to postpone and voice vote after the public hearing. And so, we'll do that right after. Yes, after the public hearing. So we're going to go to public hearing with respect to 416 Longshore Drive. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about this item. We'll first call on individuals present and then those remotely. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name if available. You'll hear an automated announcement saying that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area, mute background noises so that we can hear you clearly. And for either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Do we have anyone present that would like to speak on 416 Longshore Drive? Yes, please.
Before I start, could I ask why it was postponed again? Just
It was a noticing error.
It was a noticing
Prospectively, staff, do you want to? No.
Yeah,
noticing error.
Yeah, we take several steps to notice a public hearing in a variety of ways, and one of those steps wasn't completed apparently for this one. So to make sure that everybody receives that notice, that's our rescheduling it for the April meeting.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, no sweat. My name's Kyle Troutman. I live on 530 Detroit Street in North Central. And I want to bring up 2 points that I had about this development. The first of which is that I took a glance at the mitigation plans or the site plans, and I think that the overall plan for mitigation for this is more or less like design-wise and otherwise unacceptable. I understand that there are landmark tree requirements and that this is taking out a swath of a nice chunk of woods in the area, but to kind of disillusion yourself into thinking you can place what I think they said is 95 trees in this now extremely cramped lot is just not doable by any stretch of the imagination. If you take a glance at it, there's essentially just these circles overlapping one another. It'll look nothing short of an orchard, and it's just a little bit silly, so I would implore there to be a different way to think about how do we mitigate for all of the landmark trees and the woodland trees that are being removed in this development project. One thing that I know is that, oddly enough, the little chunk of woods to the west of this is actually a very high-quality birding hotspot in Ann Arbor, especially within the downtown realm. And I think this is due to it being, its proximity to, the downtown, but it's also a flyway. It has proximity to quality riverfront. And there's just a host of birds that migrate and reside in this little swath of woods here. So perhaps there's a way to make the mitigation, instead of just plopping 95 useless trees in an orchard style on this cramped office and now residential property, maybe there's a way to have some sort of habitat and ecological restoration in the chunk of woodland there. Perhaps there's a way to maybe not just restore, but also better that area and the habitat. I think this is difficult and would require some thinking on the end of the developer or you guys, but There needs to be a metric. You can't just say you're restoring something and have that be it. There needs to be a way to actually document and ecologically monitor what's happening there and show an increase in species and habitat. So that would be my first point, would be to reinvestigate what mitigation means for this, because if you take any close look at the site plan, I would consider it unacceptable, and it shows that there was no design thought put into this at all, and it was just required 95 trees, plop, 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 which is just not okay, in my opinion. The second point I'd like to bring up, which is less of a ask of anything of you, but would just to say an argument that I'm sure you've heard a million times, which is, why is there another luxury condominium, extreme wealth-oriented development going on in Ann Arbor? I myself am a young professional, a recent college graduate, and I just look at the plans for this and know that I would have zero chance at affording something like this. And I consider myself well off and quite privileged in a lot of ways. And I know no one like myself or within like a similar situation to my own could really think about affording to live at a place like this. And I'm sure this is something you've heard a million times, and the developer is allowed to have luxury condominiums here. But I would ask, why is it so easy to continue having projects like this, and why is there nothing to maybe de-incentivize the developer to having these, you know, it's 15 luxury condos on a 40-something thousand square foot building. So to me, it seems like there's maybe something missing there. I walk through this area every day to work, and it's a unique part of Ann Arbor. It's a unique neighborhood. It's proximity to the medical center. It has proximity to bike trails and a lot of awesome outdoor recreation. And I just think the people that would want to live here are not going to be the people that are going to live in this place. It's going to be people that are very wealthy and are driving their car into the big parking ramp and are leaving every day and are not using the space the way it could be used. Yep, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak on Longshore Drive? Yes.
Hi, my name is Judy Nicolai. I live at 517 Longshore Drive. We are a condominium community right across the street. I really have more, I guess, a comment and a question. Having lived there for 10 years, I'm quite aware of what the neighborhood is like on weekends and sometimes during the week between Memorial Day and Labor Day, when the Argo Cascades are a huge attraction in the neighborhood. I personally don't drive, but I know that my neighbors have plenty of trouble already with access to their own parking lot because of all the activity. You have people walking down the street in bathing suits, carrying tubes and kayaks. It's kind of a fun neighborhood in that regard. But it's really difficult for me to imagine this neighborhood with 15 multi-million-dollar condominiums. It doesn't suit the neighborhood energy at all. It's hard to square that circle for me. I also wonder, a lot of the area that's going to be developed here is used for parking for the Argo Cascades. And I wonder what the plans are to replace that parking, assuming that people will still want to be coming to the Cascades to canoe and kayak and do their tubing down the river. So those are my questions and concerns. I will confess that I have not had time to do much research on this project, but from the point of view of someone who lives in this neighborhood, those are the kinds of things that my neighbors are talking about, in addition to the fact that we're all rather puzzled that people who can afford that kind of a property want to live right next door to a freight train track where trains come by at all times of the day or night. So I have more comments than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak on Longshore Drive? Is there anyone remotely that would wish to address the commission?
There is one hand raised. One moment. Phone number ending in 534, you have permission to address the commission.
Hello again, this is Tom Stolberg. This is my neighborhood. I live a couple blocks away from here. I want to address what the last speaker just said about parking. So I know it's not an obligation of the developer here, the landowner, to provide parking for the Argo livery. But it would be very nice if the city would realize that this parking, which has been very helpful to have because of the popularity of the Argo Cascades and the livery, if the city can come up with a plan, more than what exists as the current plan, to help alleviate the concerns of the neighborhood from losing this parking. Again, it's not any obligation of the developers to do this, but it would be nice if the city, who runs Arbor Livery, would think about a plan for that. So that's an ask. I also have an ask of the developer. And again, this is just an ask. So that I assume the developer is going to follow the mandatory stormwater, I'm sure they are, requirements of our city and county. Right now, the impact of global climate change on our region have a very large impact on the severity of storm events and the frequency of severe storm events. So this building, like all other buildings, not unique to this one, but essentially what we're designing for right now and what we can mandate right now is going to be pretty obsolete pretty quickly. This particular site is, the topography, the situation puts it uphill of woodland and then into Arbor Livery. This is just a simple ask to the developer. If you're able to oversize your stormwater retention so that you can add 10, 20%, that would be really wonderful. And I'm hoping that that's something that we can look at in terms of all developments. I know right now there's no stormwater mitigation from this site at all, so whatever happens is an improvement. But looking forward to what is going to be the reality for our region, it'd be very nice in particular for this developer who's next to this woodland, which could be greatly impacted if there is more runoff in 5 years than is currently planned for. Thank you very much for considering that. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Stolberg. Do we have any other callers?
There are no more hands raised at this time.
All right, with that, we'll close public comment. I am looking for a motion to postpone this hearing to April 2nd. Moved by Commissioner Mills and seconded by Councilmember Dish. This just requires a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, this is postponed for the April 2nd hearing. We're moving on to section item number 9C, the 732 Packard Street PUD zoning district, and supplemental regulations and site plan for city council approval. This is a request to rezone 1.27 acre site from C1AR campus business residential to a PUD plan unit development and adopt supplemental regulations to allow development up to 450,000 square feet and 14 stories, and a site plan to construct a 14-story apartment building with optional ground floor commercial. Proposed beneficial effects of the PUD district include affordable housing by payment in lieu, enhanced sustainability, and open space. As proposed, the building has 376 apartments, 82 vehicular parking spaces, 392 bicycle parking spaces, and includes streetscape improvements. The site includes 12 parcels, 722, 726, 732, 736, and 740 Packard Street, and 917, 921, 923, 925, 927, 931, and 933 South State Street. The zoning designation that's recommended is PUD. We'll move on to petitioner presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's Andy Savoy. Coming to you from Chicago, 1647 North Milwaukee, Chicago, Illinois. I'm here to ask for your support for a proposed mixed-use housing development that will help to alleviate the housing crisis here in Ann Arbor and has some serious public benefits and environmental benefits to boot. I'm with a company called Core Spaces. We are a national university-anchored housing developer based in Chicago. We've developed close to 30,000 beds across the country, and this will be our third project in Ann Arbor. We do have a partner for this deal, Jared Shank of Shank Realty, who's sitting right behind me, as well as my entire team. The architect and engineering team is back there to help me answer any questions you might have. Just some photos of our projects around the Midwest. This will be our third in town. We have one built, one that's kind of in the permitting process, and this would be our third. So the site we're here to talk about, this is 12 parcels, about 1.3 acres in the triangular block between State and Packard. We have frontage on 2 bike lanes, northbound on State Street, southbound on Packard, and we also have direct frontage to a city park, Forsyth Park. You see some images there of the street view. And what you're going to see tonight is a 15-story mixed-use tower, mostly apartments with some retail on the ground floor, 376 units. We have 82 parking spaces, most of which are underground. And then we have a collection of townhome units along Packard that kind of mimic the use in that direction. And we have retail and kind of an open auto court along State. So the idea is to provide very active streetscapes on both sides of the project. And we would be shooting for groundbreaking in December of this year to deliver in 27, Q2. So this is, so the project will involve several off-site improvements. I'll start with those and then work my way in. So right now there are 11 curb cuts along the frontage of the property. We would be proposing to change that to only 2 curb cuts. One for our vehicular access from State, another which is kind of a pull-off area from Packard so that Uber drivers and such can pull out of the street to make their drop-offs. We're also going to be adding a crosswalk at Hoover and State. The second substantial off-site improvement is we're proposing to invest up to $250,000 in improvements to Forsyth Park to the south, and that scope would include refinishing the basketball court, new lighting, new benches, all to be coordinated and approved with city staff. And thirdly, we're proposing investing approximately $1.6 million in the DTE infrastructure in town, actually several blocks away. As we were exploring ways that might result in better kind of all-electric prospects for this project, they came up with a plan where if we were to update a circuit by Church and Willard from 4.8 kV to 13.2 kVA, then they can move buildings off of the circuit that currently serves our site, freeing up capacity to serve us in an all-electric way. We can talk about that more later, but we are proposing to make that investment as part of this project. Starting with the plan and moving up, we have our parking level in the basement. We have 17 EV installed spaces proposed here. That's 20% double the requirement. This is the ground floor. You'll see retail uses. Our main amenity level is here. We have townhomes proposed along Packard, and we also have back of house spaces and bike rooms. So this auto court that you're looking at is our main entry to the lower level garage, but we've also designed it to be able to accommodate the movements of a trash truck. So trash could be collected interior to the site. Nobody has to stop in the public way or back up onto the public way. And it could also be programmed for, from time to time, resident and public events with food trucks, et cetera, because it does kind of line up exactly with Hoover, and it's a nice court there, kind of an urban space. There are 2 bike rooms labeled here A and B. Bike room A fronts right onto that plaza, and we're thinking of that as kind of a bike bar type scenario where you have front of house type finishes and kind of a very presentable space. There's also bike room B, also accessible from the plaza. Both of these bike rooms have automatic door openers. They have frontage directly onto the plaza with windows that allow natural light. So altogether, we're proposing 332 Class A bike parking spaces. That's 4.4 times what's required. This is the mezzanine level. You'll notice there are some trees noted on our plan. Those are landmark trees that we're proposing to save. As we go up through the plans, it becomes kind of a typical corridor building, but note that we are proposing some kinks and undulations to really break up that facade to avoid any overly long stretches of building. There are several step backs that occur as you go up the building, and then on top there is a amenity deck with a pool. As far as the elevation, as far as the materiality goes, we are proposing high-quality materials on all four sides. In the upper tower, that is a mixture of cementitious cladding and a metal panel system. You can kind of see how that's used in the rendering to the right. And then for the podium element, the ground floor element, we have a warm brick with wood inlays for the entry areas. This is just kind of shows you how the building gets broken up by those undulations. We have several different heights for different parts of the building because of the step back. So on the right, you can see the height that's proposed is 116 feet. On the left it is 162 feet, and then behind it's one floor taller. We are, in the PD language, the proposed height limit is 200 feet inclusive of all rooftop equipment. These are the renderings. This is basically looking south on Packard. This is looking at that auto court from Hoover. The left image here is looking north on Packard, so Forsyth Park would be directly across the street from you to the left. And then the right image shows a shot looking downstate of the building. This starts to talk about what that pedestrian experience is like up on State. We have this brick element with these kind of warm wood inlays for the entry of the building. Similar language along Packard where you have these townhomes, but you still have these wood inlay sections that kind of communicate an entrance to the building. So our sustainability plan includes providing a LEED Silver building. We are proposing a mostly electric building with auxiliary gas backup for hot water generation. However, we will invest the $1.6 million in the DTE upgrades. And the plan would be to basically VE out that duplicative hot water generation if they can deliver the power in time. So that would be by January of '25. If not, we have to have an escape hatch because it would be a disaster to deliver a building that you cannot serve. Along with that, there are other noteworthy parts of the sustainability plan. We are providing rooftop solar that would generate 125,000 kilowatt hours of capacity. We are providing the standard low-flow appliances, speccing low-E materials. We're providing 5 times the required Class A, or 4.4 times the required Class A bike parking, double the required EV-installed parking spaces, and a compost room for residents. So there's a lot here that we're doing, notably the investment in the grid. And so as a conclusion, I can't believe I got through all that so fast. We are providing a whole slew of public benefits with this project. So not only are we increasing the housing stock and implicitly helping to alleviate the housing crisis in town, we're providing sustainable LEED Silver construction. We're increasing that real estate tax base. We're creating jobs. We're adding active uses at the ground floor. So that's retail, that's townhomes, that is this open kind of auto court. We're removing 9 curb cuts, making the investment to the DTE grid, $1.6 million, $250,000 in the adjacent park. We're proposing to invest 1% more into the affordable fund than would be required, so that's $413,000 for each percentage point. And then we will coordinate with the fire department to allow them to conduct training within our property line to the extent we can before we demolish those buildings on the way up. So with that, that closes me out.
Thank you
for the time.
Appreciate it. And then we'll move on to staff presentation.
Thank you. I'll cover a few mundane details and then I'll move into our staff analysis. I think as mentioned, but I'll make sure it's clear that this is a site that consists of 12 lots. It has 11 buildings on it currently, and all are zoned C1A/R. That is a district that is intended to, quote, or mostly, quote, intended to encourage the orderly clustering and placement of high-density residential and complementary commercial development near the campus business district. It allows up to 300% floor area ratio, and it has no minimum lot size. Staff report relists the purported beneficial effects of a plan unit, of this particular plan unit development. These are also listed identically in Section 3 of the draft supplemental regulations. I think highlights were, well, the actual purported beneficial effects were well covered by Mr. Savoy's presentation. Real high level, the beneficial effects include LEED standards, integrated solar power, additional electric vehicle charging infrastructure, electric ready building, increased density, reduced sprawl and vehicle miles traveled, affordable housing, housing diversity, streetscape activation, and neighborhood park improvements. Staff report talks a little bit about a comparison of the current and proposed zoning districts. In summary, the intent and permitted uses are similar. The dimensional aspects of the current and proposed zoning are regulated in opposite manners, but it's my opinion at the end of the day, they are similar. But the current zoning district is regulated by floor area ratio without a height limit, and the proposed district is regulated by a height limit without a floor area ratio, and also includes building coverage and open space standards. So both are trying to get at massing in different ways. And then finally, the development standards like parking, sustainability, and affordable housing are generally more stringent in the proposed PUD district. Keep my pages organized. We have gone through also an analysis of the PUD zoning district review standards. There are 7, right? Nope, sorry, there are 8. There are 8 of them. I won't go through them all, but staff, we have found that this proposal meets the standards of approval. I'll point out the first standard is that the uses, physical characteristics, design features, or amenities proposed have a beneficial effect for the city. Staff feel that the zoning district requires LEED certification, integrated solar panels, additional electric vehicle charging stations, limits on natural gas connections, increases and requires a certain density, requires affordable housing, and improvements to public parks and streetscape activation. And these are design features and amenities on site that will have a beneficial effect for the city. We've also found for standard number 2 that this beneficial effect could not be achieved under any other zoning classification. It is not required to be provided by the existing standards. We have found that other zoning classifications either do not require the beneficial effects listed or they don't require it to the degree proposed. I've gone through several points in our staff analysis. I won't repeat them tonight, but I will point out that as a package, the beneficial effects of this 732 Packard PUD better achieve the overarching goals of the comprehensive plan, which have been accepted as encouraging more dense development with a particular emphasis on more housing overall and a wider range of housing types, and encouraging more sustainable developments and living arrangements with less or no reliance on personal vehicles and reduced vehicle miles traveled than the underlying district. And given that the underlying C1A/R district designation of the site and surrounding area, the development standards of this proposed PUD are in keeping with the generalized goals and strategies of the land use element that emphasize the orderly transition between higher density commercial and residential neighborhoods. The design and massing of this project sufficiently aligns with the potential character of the surrounding remaining C1A/R district. We also have a site plan, the site plan analysis in the staff report. Site plan has been reviewed by our staff team, and we find that it meets all of the applicable standards. There are a couple minor clarifications and little tidbits that need to be taken care of on the site plan that will be taken care of prior to city council approval should this move on. The staff report also goes through some of those specific development details, like the reporting of what is the floor area ratio, the number of dwelling units, and the range between apartments and townhouses, height and setbacks, and so forth, and provides information about the access plan, landscape plan, stormwater management, and sustainability features. There are 2 proposed motions at the beginning of the staff report, and staff recommends approval and supports both. Happy to answer any follow-up questions as well.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about the item. We'll first call on individuals present and then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9 if listening by phone, or if raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of the number or by name if available. You'll hear an automated statement saying that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area, mute background noises so we can hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to address the commission?
Good evening. I'm Dan Troika. I'm an attorney representing the neighbor at 716 Packard. My address is 350 South Main at Conley, McKinney, and Philbrook here in Ann Arbor. You've seen some renderings of this property, and you will note that my client's structure is not actually shown in those renderings. My client is the owner of the building where the Domino's Pizza is currently located. So I think you all, I'm sure, know this intersection. It's a very important and vital intersection in the city of Ann Arbor. This development is coming in under a PUD because under the current zoning, it can't go beyond 300% in floor area ratio. The proposal will take it to 795%, so that's more than 2.5 increase. It's quite a substantial increase in density. One of the standards for this increase in density, which can only be done via a PUD, is to show that you don't have a detrimental impact on neighboring property. That's the 3rd criterion in the list for PUD considerations. In this case, we contend there's been no consideration at all of the impacts on my client's property. We have been in touch with the city. We've been in touch with the least people associated with the developer. I sent a letter on behalf of 716 Packard back in February 20th, but we've really gotten nothing no attention to the potential impacts on the adjacent property. It is our contention that you just can't do this. You can't rubber stamp a PUD without actually going through and giving material consideration to each of the 8 factors. So in this case, we're going to have something that is 2.65 times more dense than what is permitted under the current zoning district. Right on the property line, it's going to be 200 feet high. And granted, there's no current height restriction, but you know, if you were limited to 300 FAR, 300%, you wouldn't be able to build what they're proposing. It would be different. So what they're doing is maximizing density. It's going to have impacts on our property in terms of shade, in terms of wind and snow. It's going to basically dump things down onto the current structure and limit what we can do in the future. So I understand there's a lot going on here. I understand it's a big project, but at the end of the day, you're supposed to go through these criteria and say that they have been met. And if not, you should be recommending to City Council that they not approve this plan, or alternatively table it and have them do a shade study or shadow study to show the impacts of my client's property and to mitigate those, and only then consider making a recommendation to City Council. So it's, I understand there are a lot of factors here, but you're supposed to say that each and every one is met. There has been no analysis, no study, no nothing to show that my client's property won't be impacted. And in fact, we believe it will be impacted quite severely. And I just want to close aesthetically, what you're seeing is not what's really going to happen. My client's property with the Domino's is still going to be there, and the profile of this is going to be not what you're looking at and being asked to approve this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other folks present that would like to address the commission? Please.
Hi, my name's Lynn Kelly. I live at 1912 Anderson. I am pro-development. Clearly, we need to have more density. I'm not opposed to that. However, 14 stories or maybe 15, well, before I say that, it seems to be a very thoughtful design. I appreciate the sustainability. I appreciate the aesthetics. I appreciate trying to set back different parts of it in different ways so it's not a huge mass on the sidewalk. I wish it didn't have to be close, 5 feet setbacks, but I get it. If you're trying to ram a lot of apartments in there, you have to have a lot of floor space, a big footprint. But 14 stories, or I think I heard you say 15 stories, in a neighborhood where the prevailing structures are 3 or 4 stories, that just seems to me to be not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. I understand that the staff is recommending this, and I also understand that I'm Davy against Goliath here, but it just seems like a 7-story apartment building there would be great. It's a great place to develop. I assume that Domino's was part of this. I'm a little surprised to hear that Domino's isn't one of these parcels, but that seems to be another issue. I guess I'm arguing for, can't we cap it at 7 stories? That's already massive. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Bella Mazaris, and I live at 711 Arch Street. My apartment building, along with a collection of houses and a park, will remain on this block on the south side of the proposed development. These exist in a high-foot traffic area popular with students. The proposed development has a lot going for it, and you've heard about that and we'll hear about that today. In light of previous comments about the use of PUDs, let's talk about how we can put this one to work in a unique way. This PUD includes a stipulation that the developers pay for improvements to Forsyth Park, which I have been hoping to see since I moved here. The park is neglected and walled in from the neighborhood as it exists now. What I would like to see as part of this contribution is a public pathway on the south side of the property connecting State to Packard. This would increase access to the park and residences like mine along the south side of the property for pedestrians. Meanwhile, this would also directly connect to the new bicycle facilities along South State Street and UM's athletic facilities and the proposed building's front entrance. A public path along the south side of this development would be a wonderful contribution to the streetscape. Every day, I see people using the parking lots behind my building to cut through the block. Right now, I think the developer proposes to fence this area off once the building is up. Instead, a public path could allow this flow of pedestrians to exist in a safe, welcoming environment. PUDs are a give and take. This is a small but impactful way that the developer can make a major contribution to the public good and the character of the neighborhood. My balcony looks right back at this proposed development, and I would much rather see a welcoming space there than a walled-off alleyway. All I ask is that this 14-story apartment building that will soon rise above my home include this small improvement to the built environment as part of its contribution to the city under the PUD. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the commission? Mr. Moore, are you on behalf of the petitioner or?
On behalf
Public.
of me.
Okay, cool.
All right. Although I am working with the petitioner.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring some of the planning commissioners who weren't here during our PUD conference up to speed and kind of refresh the memories of those of you that were on that pre-PUD conference. We've incorporated many of the suggestions from that pre-PUD conference that you'll see in this design. I believe, Commissioner Weitz, you had been concerned about the number of curb cuts onto Packard, where there's a bike lane proximate to our building. So we've eliminated the one curb cut that went to our underground parking, combined it to the State Street curb cut. So now we don't have that potential conflict with the bicyclist. I believe it was Commissioner Gibbs Randall who wanted us to enlist an arborist to determine which of the landmark trees on the site had the greatest chance of survivability. And those are the two of the 4 that are there. The 2 we've shown as remaining were the ones that our arborist said had the highest likelihood of being fine. They are sandwiched between the foundations of 2 of the existing buildings. And so once those buildings are removed, high-quality soils can be replaced and nurture those trees. So they're the highest likelihood of surviving. I believe Commissioner Mills is one of the commissioners that talked about the fact that a high-quality design is a public benefit and that we should really key in and focus on the pedestrian experience on both of the streets. So we've added the townhouse units, and you'll see we have spent a lot of attention to the streetscape and how the pedestrians interact with the project, and you'll see that in our renderings. So that's just by way of saying we have been responsive to the comments we've heard from the Planning Commission before. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else present that would like to speak to the commission? Do we have any remote callers?
There are no hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I'm sorry, two hands were just raised.
All right. That's why we give it a moment. Thank you.
Adam Yuskevich, you have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Hi, this is Adam Druskevich calling from Las Vegas Drive in the 4th Ward. I would like to support staff's recommendation that this rezoning site plan and development agreement be approved. For all the reasons outlined in the staff report, including the additional housing and density in a walkable area close to student destinations, affordable housing, A20 sustainability standards, park improvements, and more, this project meets our standards and will provide the significant benefits to the city and to the neighborhood. We are in a housing crisis and in a climate crisis, and adding a significant number of housing units in an area where most of the residents will have no need to drive a car will go a long way toward addressing both of these. We're also in a traffic violence crisis, and eliminating curb cuts will significantly improve pedestrian and cyclist safety along 2 major corridors. I also want to support a comment that Councilmember Bish made earlier. The format of staff reports I've seen in this meeting makes it a lot easier to see where a project does and does not meet the requirements of the UDC. Thank you for making this change. I hope that you pass this tonight, and I look forward to seeing it built. I'd also like to mention that the Domino's is going to sell a hell of a lot of pizza. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle Hughes, you have permission to address the Planning Commission.
Hi, I was just going to say I lived in that neighborhood for 10 years. I was at what used to be called the Lester House Co-op, and is now called the Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson House. It's one of the ICC co-ops, and in my experience from living in that neighborhood, what is needed is more housing. The people who live there, there's a lot of students in that neighborhood, and they're just crammed into these old houses. And it would be better to have dense housing than the type of crowded housing that's in there now. And, you know, I think that a neighborhood that, you know, is generally 3 stories right now, it can't become a neighborhood that everything's generally 17 stories until someone does it first. So let this be the first one, because that'd be great. I also hope that one day the co-ops can build big in that neighborhood, because I'd love to have more co-opers, but failing that, I'd love to have more neighbors of co-opers. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers on the line?
Caller with phone number ending in 194, you have permission to address the Planning Commission.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Okay, thank you. Hi, this is Rita Mitchell calling from 621 5th Street in the Old West Side. And my concern with this project as presented has to do with one additional element that hasn't been discussed. This will be a very tall building in an area that's really at most 2-story region in that particular part of town. And it'll be raising a lot of window space that will be a risk for birds in the area. And I would ask that the developer strongly include bird-safe glass, which is fretted, small dots, 2 inches apart, across each window to prevent bird strikes the best possible. Otherwise, I can anticipate a fair number of dead birds, unfortunately, around the building. That would be quite unpleasant for the birds and for the public. I also would comment that I appreciate the attention to the park nearby. Forsyth Park has been ignored for a long time, and it's great that this developer is paying attention and preparing to support improvements in that park. So that's really all I have to say, but I'd also like to call out that as a developer in the Chicago area, the attention to birds should be something that would be quite familiar because of the many bird strikes that happen in that city. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other callers on the line?
Yes. Adam Goodman, you have permission to address Planning Commission.
Hi, this is Adam Goodman speaking to you from the 5th Ward. I think this is a fantastic project. I hope you'll approve it. I had one small concern, which is the bike parking. It looks to me like 100% of the bike parking spaces are Class A. This is generally something that's allowed by our code. Our code presumes that Class A is always better than Class B, and Class B is always better than Class C. However, and I think I've brought this to your attention before, I don't believe that this is actually true in reality, because Class A spaces are generally locked up. And so in a building like this, they would only be available to residents. I would prefer to see in this project and projects like it a mix of Class A spaces for residents and then Class B or C spaces for visitors to the building. I hope this is something that y'all can maybe explore with the developer tonight. But regardless of that, that's a minor point. I overall think this is a fantastic project and hope you'll approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Any other callers?
There do not appear to be more callers.
Okay. All right, we'll give just one more second. Okay, with that, I'll close public comment. I'm going to read the proposed motions to take them together, unless there is strong opposition to take them separately. Okay, all right. I'm going to read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission recommends that the mayor and city council approve the 732 Packard PUD zoning district and supplemental regulations. And the second motion being that the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission recommends that the city and mayor, city council and mayor approve the 732 Packard site plan and development agreement subject to addressing the outstanding comments from staff. Moved by Commissioner Mills and seconded by Commissioner Weich. We're in discussion. Councilmember Dish.
Thank you, Chair Lee. I want to talk about the things that I appreciate about this project. I think it's really important that the intent and permitted uses of this PUD are similar to the existing C1AR underlying districting. Both are designed to encourage orderly clustering and placement of high-density residential development near campus. The PUD will achieve this by coordinated development of 12 parcels into a more efficient 14-story residential development than what is currently there. Yes, the height increase is significant relative to what is there, but rather than focus on height, I'd like to speak briefly about density and efficiency. The project will be 2.6 times the underlying density, and it will deliver 376 dwelling units, which is more than 10 times the number of dwelling units that the parcels currently provide, which I understand is 33. That is a very good ratio of density increase to housing unit increase. I'm not going to go over the benefits because they've been sketched out a couple of times and they are numerous and exciting. I'm really interested to see how the investment of $1.6 million in DTE's infrastructure works out. It sounds like you are doing this without a clear guarantee that the capacity that you need, will be available when you need it. So if it isn't, will you have some gas infrastructure that will become sort of, what is it? Extraneous. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
So the intent for the base case would be to permit this building as a hybrid building with a gas boiler for auxiliary hot water generation. If within 18 months of when we intend to deliver, we can get away with value engineering that out of our price, we will. But before we say we're going to do that, we need to make sure that we can get the power to actually serve the building as all electric and reduce the need for that boiler.
Okay, so are you providing water heat?
That's correct. So we would have a gas boiler for water heat, not only for the retail portion, but for the residential portion as well. That's the element that takes the most electricity, and it's hard to do that when the grid is overloaded, particularly in the winter. And so that's when that would the boiler, if we were to build that building with the auxiliary boiler, that's when the boiler would be most active, would be during the winter months. If we can get the power to not have the boiler, we certainly don't want to pay for it, so we would rather not build it, given that we have already paid DTE to extend power to our site. So the plan would be to have the ability to do the boiler if we need it, without coming back to City Council or Plan Commission, and then try not to.
And then you can heat a building using essentially radiators with electricity? You can heat the water with electricity?
Right. So
wow, that's cool.
It's
okay.
a water-sourced heat pump system. So
that's very cool. Thank you. I'm trying not to be too slow, but just wanted to spell it all out so I can explain it. Okay, so that is great. Thank you very much. I was going to ask you about compost, but you mentioned that there will be a compost room for residents, and that's great. OSI suggested that you pair solar with batteries. I don't know if that's advantageous to you, so I throw that back out. You don't need to, you can come back and answer everything later that everyone asks you. I wanted to ask staff to pursue two really good ideas from the public comments, and one was the idea of bird-safe glass. And I'm asking staff to pursue this. I'm not trying to open a conversation. And then I thought that Bella Mazzariz's suggestion about a public pathway on the south side of Forsyth Park to improve connectivity to UM and bike and pedestrian transit was something worth exploring. And I don't, if you at the end want to speak to any of that, but I'm asking staff to, if that's okay.
I have noted those two follow-up requests.
Okay. Commissioner White.
So thanks for bringing this project to us. Thanks for listening to us in the pre-PUD. Thanks for offloading the deliveries into your auto court, though I would try to think of a better name for that. One thing that I persistently see as a biker in the city is, in spite of there being driveways in development, delivery vehicles still try to wedge themselves into the bike facilities. So I don't know if there is a way to incentivize that with poles that are closest to the entrance, because what I see them doing, they did it yesterday at University Tower. There's a driveway where they can go in to do their delivery, but they sit a quarter way into the bike lane. So you still have to move around them, and if there's two-way bike traffic, that creates a problem. So I wonder, I think we talked about this at 333 Williams development, where they were gonna put poles right before the cutouts so that the delivery trucks couldn't just wedge themselves in such a way, because they don't want to go into your auto court to do their delivery, because then they have to turn around or back out or something like that. So they still want to stay parallel to the building so they can jump out, do the delivery, and jump back in. But that creates a hazard for bikers. So if there's any way for us to look at that just at the cutouts, I think if we did that, like poles at each side of the cutout, I think that would de-emphasize that and would be safer for bikers. I also want to thank you for hearing me talk recently about cargo bikes and noting it on your site plan that you plan to do that. I count 12 Class C bike spaces that are available to the public. Is that correct on your site plan?
That is correct.
Okay, and then everything else is Class A inside the building. There isn't any transporting of bikes up a level or down a level. It's all on ground floor?
That is correct.
And then you noted but didn't note in your benefits that you were also planning to do e-bike charging as well. I would ask that you put that on your sheet to say that you're creating facility for e-bikes and that you're creating facility for them to be charged, because I think that that is also helpful. And then what was my other question? I lost my other question. When it comes back to me, I will ask it.
Thank you. And just a quick reminder, please speak into the mic, because otherwise it won't be picked up when you are responding, so that everybody that's listening outside can hear. So would appreciate that. Any other commissioners? Commissioner White.
It's for staff. It's just a technical question so that I can understand something that I read that I did not understand. At one place in one report, it felt like I was reading that the affordable housing wasn't required because of the underlying zoning. And then in another place, it was required. And so I just wanted to understand the delta from CA1R to the PUD with how we would treat the affordable housing quotient. Because I was just confused in what I read. Because in one place it was like, we didn't have to do this. And I was like, but you did. And then you're now saying you only did 1% more. So just clarity for me.
Yeah, well, yes, it is all about 1%. In standard number 5, there's a standard number 5 talks about when residential uses are proposed and it exceeds the underlying density, then 15% of the floor area must be dedicated to affordable housing dwelling units. And so projects that propose 15% affordable housing, we are not going to say no, thank you to. However, that is the standard of approval, but that standard is 15%. This project is proposing 16%, and they don't have to. So we would like to give credit where credit is due. And when you have a project of this size, that 1%, is significant, and they are requesting a payment in lieu. So that is a lot of extra dollars. And so we would like to acknowledge that they are proposing, and then we have codified that 16% is required in this district.
So and just if you could bear with me for a second. So it is not the case that they are not required to do the 15%. That was required from CA1R to here.
Yes, a standard of approval is 15% affordable housing, because this is more than 300% FAR?
Because of the FAR,
yes.
But it's not based on, like when we were looking at the PUD for 711 Church, and it was R4C to the PUD, and it was at 10 times the density because of the units per acre. We don't have a units per acre density here. We're using FAR instead.
Yeah. Well, that project too, that project, it was also required to have 15%
yes.
affordable housing. And they were saying that was a purported benefit, and staff was saying that is a standard of approval.
So
and
here,
because they remained at 15%. At the table,
we moved them.
At the table, it moved to 17%.
Correct.
But it is an entirely different project. Here, the minimum standard is 15%, and like I said, we would say thank you very much, but that is not a benefit of this PUD to just meeting the 15%. But they are proposing 16%, and that's something that we cannot require.
I don't know if I'm just in my reading, it was hard to track all of that, because at one point it felt like it wasn't required, and then it was like, oh, and we're just doing this, and then it was, no, we're just doing 1%. So like that, I think I understand what you're saying now, is because they are doing 1% more than is required, you acknowledge that as a public benefit
yes.
in the staff report.
Yeah, as a public benefit that we could not get otherwise.
Okay, so again, for the developers, on that sheet that you created of all the benefits, the 15% is just a given because of the density, so it's really just the 1%. And I think that would be a little clearer, and it would be a little more honest in the reporting, especially since this has to go to City Council and will be subject to another public hearing. And then I also wanted to support, is it Bella? Was that? Okay. Bella's suggestion for the sidewalk to come on the south side of the building through Forsyth Park to connect Packard and State. So if the developer is agreeable to that, and that can go into the $250,000 park improvement, I'd love to see that there.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Weatherby.
All right, so I just have kind of a set of things. I think I'll focus primarily on kind of bike lanes, pedestrian access. Can someone show me like where entrance, ingress, egress to this building will be for pedestrians, bicyclists? Like where are the stairwells? I mean, I saw the lobby is kind of in the middle.
In addition to their response, in the packet, there is an attachment called architectural plan, I believe.
Yep.
And on page 4 of 22, there are some triangles at each of the entrance.
Right.
The entrances are denoted by triangles on sheet 4 of 22.
Okay.
So the image you're looking at now, you'll see black triangles everywhere where there's an entrance, and so the main entrances are both from State and from Packard Street. You see these triangles?
Yep.
And so you would enter into kind of an interior circulation zone where there would be doors actually out to both streets. There's also an exit here out to that court. And then you'll see other kind of exits and entries into the bike rooms notated on the outside of the plan by a black triangle.
Okay, so if I'm living in this building and I call to get pizza delivered, all right, pizza maybe is a bad idea. I call to get a sub delivered. Pizza, we'll just walk down, go around the corner. Where would you expect that delivery driver, I'm getting groceries delivered, let's go with that. Where would that delivery driver, where would I tell that delivery driver to stop?
So you would want to tell them to stop along Packard in the cutout, which is shown at the top of the screen here.
Yeah.
So there is a curb cutout there specifically for standing vehicles to get them out of the street, and our Packard Street entrance is right there.
So that's a nice entrance that's not just like the bottom of a stairwell.
That is
main. That is where the building address is. That's where
Okay.
it's 732 Packard.
Okay.
And we do have an image of that coming right up.
It's right here.
Okay.
And so,
Because certainly as I walk down Main Street and I walk by 615 South Main, the yard, it's a very similar position where there is a private company that's not part of the building that has a parking lot at the end of the street, and there's a lot of conflict with that. And there's always people in the bike lanes parking for deliveries and for, so I'm really happy that there is a spot that is designated for this and does not interfere with the bike lane, does not interfere with the sidewalk, right? I mean, I'm nod, okay.
I know, we did the yard, and I know that delivery vehicles park in the bike lane. It's just the most convenient place for them to park. So this is a dedicated space for drop-off.
And it is near the, because one of the things with that one has a lot of space, but it's not near the front entrance where people are going to come in and out and feel safe and comfortable. And so this has a designated area. And is there going to be some sort of buzz-in for delivery or so that packages aren't just left out on the street? Is there
yes. So we would have on-site management during delivery hours that would handle that. We have a system called Butterfly MX, which we could arrange for entry into the building through that system.
Okay, because
so
that's
that would
just
be at both main entrances, particularly the one you're talking about is shown there. You see that actual curb cut, is about 20 feet away from the actual entrance.
Okay, perfect. Just because this is a really big issue with a lot of buildings in town, and in this spot, which is extraordinarily heavy traffic of all types on both sides, it could really be a big problem. So I'm glad that that has been discussed and thought about. Let's see, just another, I like the mixture of the apartment sizes. I think that's a really good thing for this. We don't always see that. Bird-safe glass, it sounds like a silly thing, but it's actually a big deal. So another point for the bird-safe glass. And then the other question, so I know you're going to work on are you adding a crosswalk at Hoover or moving the crosswalk from the south side to the north side of Hoover and State?
The orientation and location of the crosswalk is essentially the same. We're moving some ramps around a little bit to accommodate some poles, but we're upgrading the signal there, because actually the exit from the courtyard will be a signalized exit. It'll be actually a four-way stoplight as opposed to a three-way right now. So there's just generalized improvements there.
Because there's not a crosswalk on the north side of that intersection. There's only a crosswalk on the south side of that intersection.
Is it? I thought it was just the opposite, but
it used
there's
to
only
be.
one. I agree.
It used to be. It was switched.
Okay.
Because the north side didn't work, the south side had to.
Yeah, there's one, and I won't debate which side it's on. I know there's one right now.
Yeah, okay. And then a point for the city, maybe, that is probably not your responsibility, but that whole intersection, not the State Packard Arbor intersection is a really intense intersection, and when we're adding a lot of people right on that corner, and there's a lot of bikes, and there's a lot of, it's a hard one to kind of get across. It's kind of a scramble. So I don't know if we can do something to make that, maybe it just appears unsafe as a pedestrian, and maybe it's fine, but that is something that I'd like if, the somebody could take a look and see if there's something, because if we're adding a lot of people right at that corner, and a lot more, I'm not at all concerned about the car use from that building. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Car use to that building and away from that building, and bikes and people, is just going to add a lot of intensity to that whole kind of wild intersection there. And so if there's any way that we can kind of have somebody taking a look at that, separate really from your responsibility, but just in general to make sure everybody can safely get to campus and downtown and with this upgrade. But other than that, I think it's a great building. I think there's a lot of good things about it. It's definitely a change. It's going to be a big change. And that's what we need. So.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Abrams.
I just wanted to ask a clarification question about the building electrification. We received a communication from a community member who was concerned about the retail/restaurant space having a gas hookup, and I wondered whether your kind of conditional commitment to building electrification based on the upgrades to DTE would include the retail space as well.
I would prefer to have the flexibility to offer a gas connection to a potential tenant in that space. If it comes down to prohibiting that, it's a small enough piece of the development that I could live with that. It would be better, though, to offer more options for potential tenants. So I would prefer to keep that option on the table for a gas connection for a retailer in that 2,000 square foot retail space.
So in your mind, the ideal scenario is that the DTE upgrades happen in time and the building is all electric except for that retail space.
That's correct.
What's that? And backup generator. Got it. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams.
Does that work with the supplemental regulations that are on the table, which, as I'm reading them, only contemplate a natural gas connection for auxiliary hot water generation?
That's what we would ask for our base case. We would have to add language in there about actually making that DTE payment to make sure that that process gets set in motion. That was a late email after the staff report was compiled. So, but in a base case, we would want the ability to use a supplemental boiler to provide auxiliary hot water generation just in case DTE cannot stick to their schedule, because the scenario in which we deliver a building of this size in a way where it can't be served by electricity is very, very bad. So we need to have that approved and on the table.
Chair, quick follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
What I understand, so I understood in the last exchange, though, that you intended to potentially offer a gas connection to the potential restaurant tenants in those spaces. Did I mishear you?
Right, that is correct.
What I was asking is that intention consistent with the regulations that we have on the table in front of us tonight? Or is that something that needs to be amended as part of the regulations?
I would defer to you. I thought, my understanding was that auxiliary gas connection for retail uses was in there, but maybe I misread
It says
that.
auxiliary hot water generation.
Okay.
You are correct that the draft language would not cover that option for the restaurant. And I would encourage the Planning Commission to discuss whether that would be acceptable revision to the draft.
I'm fine either way. I just heard something that seemed inconsistent with what I was seeing on the page. And if that's going to leave those spaces dark, then that's a problem, right? So I just wanted to flag it.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Mills.
I want to follow up a little bit on that, in part because it seemed like maybe staff wanted to say a little bit more, and I was curious about what staff maybe wanted to add on this.
Just that in addition to the option for restaurant, it doesn't currently provide for gas for backup power. The language is.
Right, and that was in the that was in the staff report too, that was the intention behind this. So I was curious about that within the supplemental regs.
I feel like 99.9% accurate is good enough. But joking aside, I can take ownership for that. I think that in just the very last minute, this is a draft. Maybe our signals or communication cross paths. We have the opportunity to revise it now. We would, just so you know, as a course of action, we also provide an applicant one last opportunity to review and revise both the development agreement document and the supplemental regulations. If it differs from this version tonight, going to City Council, and you are not aware, we have not previously discussed it, we would make it abundantly clear to City Council that this is a change. And like I said, I think that we may, Mr. Savoy and I may have a cross paths in our communication and our reviews of these documents. This draft was finalized last Wednesday, I believe.
Yeah, I know if I could jump into and share my perspective in a conversation that we had as well. I was really excited because I saw an email that at the time, I think the approach was, as the petitioner indicated, this building is going to be designed with a heat source in such a way that the source of that heat source, I think you said heat pump, that can be fueled either with natural gas or electricity. That technology exists. That adaptability is, they're planning on that for that sign. I got really excited when we got an email saying, hey, we might have a solution to actually do this with fully electric, as that I know that's an interest of the Planning Commission and the City Council. Based on our conversation, I maintained that excitement, but I also cautioned him that there's a lot of ifs in that. For us to put a requirement in the supplemental regulations that it has to be electric at this point for that source is, in that case, him putting this project's delivery and realization on decisions by DTE that will be out of their control. And so my advice was to retain this language as it is, be upfront with the Planning Commission. I really appreciated them being really transparent about some of the cost factors and the challenges with that. But I just want to also add that context. That is why I don't recommend at this point that this say the only restriction would be allowance would be natural gas for the retail spaces as well as emergency power backup. That's up to you. If that is a critical benefit that you want to see that, then you have additional information here for that. But to memorialize that requirement building-wide for electrification, I just want to be honest and let you hear from the petitioner that that is putting decisions that they are willing to facilitate and invest in, but there's time associations and realization of those that will be drastically out of their control.
Is that okay? Okay. I was going to say, I get that, and I'm probably going to say something that is going to shock people. First of all, the presentation that included this 1.6 million wasn't, right, like it wasn't in any of the stuff that we saw. And so that actually gives me a whole lot more comfort behind the language that's in here about because it's not achievable, because we hear over and over again, it's not achievable. This seems to me to be like a good faith effort. The reality is, I mean, again, because it's not in anything that we have, we're taking your word on it. And so coming in here, I was like, we know that we've been told multiple times, oh, sorry, that's crazy. We've been told multiple times that the grid can't handle electric generally for many buildings, right? And so is this really going to happen? And it seems like there may well be a path towards that. So I leave it up to staff, honestly, in the next iteration to know what our goals are here and to write it. And then again, like, this is not your first building here. This will not be it sounds like this, you don't want this to be your last building here. We remember.
Yeah, that's correct.
I mean, that's the reality. Like, I remember at least, try to remember what people tell us and then what actually comes to be. So I am comfortable with staff working that out, and however that comes. I don't love it when people like tell us something that like, we're not holding your feet to, because if you tell us that you're working with DT and making this investment of $1.6 million, if you don't do that, that's just pork warm anyway. So, okay. So I'm thinking on the sustainability, I think that is definitely making good faith effort. And so I'm trying to think about, again, how is this different? Like, what are the community benefits associated with this different? I appreciate the pedestrian experience. I think that the western facade along State Street, having the cutout to accommodate the large existing trees is amazing. Like, I think that that's really going to change that experience, and I think that that's definitely something that the underlying zoning doesn't require. And so I think that's great. I'm curious about what your plan is to make sure that you don't kill the trees in the process of demolishing everything else.
He's best to answer that.
So I actually met with Bill Lawrence, the former city forester, who's our arborist on site, to discuss that process. The two homes which flank those two trees, left and right, will be demolished, and then the basement's pulled away from the trees. And then he's designing a backfill mix. Because of the species they are, it has to be well drained. You don't want a lot of water sitting up against those roots because it'll kill the tree. So it's going to be a mixture of sand and loam in lifts that get put back into the voids that are created by the removal of the foundation system. And then you'll notice we have protection zones outlined around each of those trees. So once that new soil is put in there, the protection methods we're putting even outside what's required by the city. So you'll see two dashed circles there. One is the minimum requirement by the city, and the second one is where we intend to make sure there's a no drive zone so that all that new soil doesn't get compacted. And then he's also coming up with a watering schedule to make sure that the trees get enough water for the first 2 or 3 years as the roots are growing into that new soil that's being placed there.
Great. Sure, that specifically on, yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm watching 2270 be developed, and there are some ancient trees that line, there's a grove of them that line, and I'm watching the trucks decimate the branches of that tree. And I've watched them take out one of our trees in our easement there. So can you just say a little bit more about how you are planning to protect that, with the no drive? Like, is that?
Well, so there'll be on-site construction management, the barriers will be erected, and as regards the canopy, if there has to be some selective pruning where the branches may go outside of that area where there might be a crane swing coming into play, then the arborist will direct the selective pruning of the canopy. That actually can help the tree survive.
Sure. And then a follow-up to staff, if those trees are harmed, they'll have to remediate that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they're a central feature of our pedestrian plaza.
We understand. I'm just following Commissioner Mills' lead here with, like, are we going to do what we say?
And just, you know this, but for everybody else's benefit who only follows the project that's in their neighborhood, it's not just the normal mitigation metric that you have to pay if you take out a tree that you say you're going to save. There's a penalty in the Unified Development Code, so we do take it seriously. Again, for the TV friends out there. Okay, so I see that is something that is unique to this particular district, and I don't see that it's really in the supplemental regs, and I don't know how people feel about putting it in the supplemental regs, but I think that that's a real big benefit. And if there's I don't need to change things at the table. I'm just saying I see that as a benefit. Let's think. A question about the benefits that are shown, and this is just for my own reminding me, the park improvements, is that as a result of the PUD, or is that just as a result of development because we require payment to parks when you add more housing?
It may be semantics, but perhaps the planning department can correct me. We don't require it, we ask. Right? So what we've been doing, rather than it going into some amorphous fund, we've hired a landscape architect who's done city park work, and we've been working with the city parks department to identify those areas of that park which need the most help. And so we would be participating in replacing those elements, the rotting benches, the street lights, the park lights that don't work, till we hit that threshold. So you're seeing those improvements happen as the building's being built.
Got it. All right, super. But that multiplier is roughly what we ask of to make sure that our investment in our parks is commensurate as we're adding people, that our parks are keeping pace with that. Okay, great. Let's think. Public path on the south. I also just want to say, I think the location of the bike rooms alone is something that we don't require, but I think it's great that it's at surface, that they are easily accessible, that there's an entrance into the rest of the building from them. I think that is inspired, and I'm intrigued by this bar in the bike room and very intrigued. So in summary, one of the things that I think about is again, what are our standards for approval of a PUD? And also, one of the things that didn't come up in this discussion of a PUD quite as much, although it came up just a little bit, are kind of the public benefits that are offered commensurate with the base of what is there right now. And there's some measures for that, for example, for affordable housing contribution, but that is a standard, but this balancing act. My sense is this is it's not any one thing, I would say, that this maxes out on. It's not like it's 100% maxing out on sustainability. It is providing additional affordability or affordable housing contribution, but it's not like knocking it out of the park. But I think that there's a combination of things. And again, what this entire block could allow is something that's half the height, but covering the entire thing. And I think that the arrangement of this building and the thinking about how many curb cuts there are is really thoughtful. And so I think collectively it is providing that benefit. So this is something that I'm excited to support. And again, thank you. The staff report was really helpful in laying out what's there now and how this is the same or different.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Any other? Commissioner Adams.
So I want to echo Commissioner Mills' comments about the staff report. I thought it was excellent and thoughtful and careful. I agree with the analysis in it. I intend to vote to recommend approval. But I do want to stop and note the objection filed by Mr. Troika. I agree with the claim that the UDC requires a consideration of whether the development will have a detrimental impact on neighboring properties, and I want to take a moment to address the issues raised in his letter and explain why I'm voting to recommend approval in spite of these effects. So the UDC requires that we consider whether there is a detrimental impact. It doesn't define that, but it also doesn't require, and this is contrary to the claims in the letter, that we quantify or investigate those effects. We have to consider them as part of our analysis, and I think we are. The letter identifies 4 potential impacts: shade, redirected precipitation sources, additional wind, and the location of new dumpsters. I think interpreting detrimental effect in the UDC to mean that a PUD cannot change the direction of the wind, cannot impact the way the precipitation flows, cannot block the sun, cannot generate new refuse receptacles would mean that PUDs could functionally never be approved or could only be approved with a kind of analysis that the law by its terms doesn't require. And I think when we look at the prevailing zoning on this site, that only underscores this conclusion. A project could be built on this site today by right that, although not as tall as this project, could still be quite tall enough to generate all of the effects listed in the letter to some or perhaps all of the degree that this project would. And I don't think it's reasonable to interpret the UDC to forbid the approval of a PUD district because it might generate these things in this manner, particularly, again, with the prevailing zoning defined the way that it is. So with that, again, I just want to say that this is a fantastic project. I think the corridor here has struggled for years for lack of density. When I was a student, I lived across the street from this project on State, and it was astonishing to me at the time that restaurants and bars couldn't stay open on these streets. And that's because there weren't enough students. There's too much low-density housing in this area to support viable restaurants, bars, the kind of things you see on South University. So I'm happy to see that we're going to have additional density finally in this area. A personal note as well, I want to note that there was a U of M student killed across the street next to where I lived in a rundown building that's not terribly unlike the buildings that are being bulldozed to make way for this project. And I think it's fantastic that we're finally replacing some of this legacy housing stock with new buildings that are safe and to code. And I think if my kids end up going and attending the University of Michigan, if I'm lucky enough to have kids that attend, I want them living in buildings that are safe. So I'm happy to see this project and happy to vote to support it.
Thank you. Councilmember Dish.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. I was hoping you would address that. I wanted to come back to the question of the public benefit that Commissioner Mills raised. I think that this is what I was trying to say in my comments, that the public benefit needs to be proportional to the increase that's asked for. And if we think about the increase in terms of height alone, it feels like, oh, this is a very big increase. But if we think about this increase in terms of density, and if we think about what we are getting for the increase in density, for a 2.6 times increase in density, we are getting 10 times the dwelling units. And so that's what I mean to say, that what the developer is asking for and what is being delivered in terms of one of the things that we want, which is density, is in an appropriate balance. And I agree with you very much, and you did a beautiful job, Commissioner Mills, teasing out further the real benefits of this project that perhaps ought to be memorialized in the supplemental regs, but we'll leave that to the staff. There are many benefits in this project that, taken together, I think we are getting really quite a lot, and I'm extremely excited about the project.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? I'll add some of my comments. I think when this first came to PUD here, I think we gave some feedback that this seemed, I think the word used was brutal, if I recall. But I feel like a lot of that has been addressed. I think it came in originally at 17 stories, if I recall correctly, and we felt that it was a rectangular block being fixed into a, what could be a triangular kind of a beautiful building with a visual plaza that I think coming down State Street, what does the experience of the user feel like? And so I feel like a lot of those elements have been addressed. I do think that there are some hard angles still. So as far as we've addressed proportionality, I'm going to start actually with something a little more kind of detailed. This one's dedicated towards staff. There are so this is in the PUD language itself in the dimensional standards. It says it's a minimum of 6 stories and then a max of like a feet. And so the minimum building height is 6 stories. The maximum building height shall be 15 stories and 200 feet. Do we have a standardized, like, what is 1 story? Like, what is the minimum of 6 stories? So this is like I know that sometimes like the first story is, 18 feet as prescribed by, code, but is there a particular reason that the dimensional standard isn't just like 72 feet, or what's the minimum building height? So kind of a stickler, sorry. It's a very detailed, nitpicky question.
It is my professional opinion that having a minimum number of stories will get at what we want better than putting in a number of feet. I think it's very clear here, and we only include this because they are saying that a benefit is increased density.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So, although there are a lot of reasons why they cannot then get the PUD approved and then probably come in with a 1-story building.
Yep.
But nevertheless, I feel to be holistic, I do want to add a minimum number of stories. And this is, I think, is very clear. 6 stories. They would have the option then to make those stories 9 feet tall, if that's maybe the minimum building code, or 15-foot stories.
Right.
So they could do that. I am going a little bit of faith. But I feel that with a minimum number of feet, there's not then I think the expectation is less clear. And if we want density, and if that is a purported benefit of the site, I think that 6 stories, and it could be, that is maybe open for debate, but I think 6 stories is a very clear expectation for,
Sure.
If you're saying it's increased density, well then, it needs to be at least 6 stories.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, again, that was kind of like a very detailed level question. I'm going to go a little more broader, again, kind of the applicability of PUD I think we've discussed. So encourage innovation in land use, variety of design layout. I do think that the kind of porosity or the pockets with the setbacks that creates, additional kind of pedestrian interaction is helpful. I'm also going to advocate, again, I think it was Commissioner Gabrandel who said, this is like the worst intersection ever. And so we need to do our part in the right of way to try to make this a more friendly intersection. I've spent a lot, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I did just circulate an email to the commission, but looking in the capital improvement plan in 2025, there is almost $1 million earmarked for this area that does include crosswalk improvements. To get more details on if there's any anticipated delays or anything, we would need to confer with our colleagues in transportation, but it appears to already have been identified and some dollars set aside.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I think we need to do our part in making sure that the intersection is more legible to the users. And so Aside, in addition to that, we've spent a lot of time looking at the retail. So I do recognize the grilled cheesery has been closed for quite some time. One of the most salient variables to retail success I've said here is clustering. And so I would love to see some, heavy emphasis at, amenitizing through retail storefronts. But also, I will also add that I was at the Michigan Restaurant Lodging Association meeting a few weeks ago. I had a chance to talk to a lot of operators from around the state and asked, hey, would you lease a fully electric space? Most of them gave me a pretty unequivocal, I need gas in my kitchen. And so that's been an interesting kind of, that being said, I've talked to some architects that have given examples of kitchens that have worked with induction stoves and that have worked. And so just wanted to give those kinds of two different standpoints. The operators, the people that you want to lease to have said, I don't want to lease that space. And so giving the flexibility, I think, is responding to a market demand. Looking at PUD, encourage innovation land use, variety and design layout. I think that's been, that's check. To achieve economy and efficiency in use of land, I think, again, that's a check. In the use of land, natural resources, energy, and the provision of public services and utilities, I think that's done. Encourage the provision of open space, protection of natural features. I think that's also been accomplished here. Providing adequate housing, employment, shopping opportunities. Yes, particularly suited to the needs of the residents of the city. I did get the comprehensive plan update that said that 75% of the growth in the last 40 years have been actually predominantly students, so they are a big part of the city. Expanding the supply of affordable housing, $6.5 million, I think. Again, we appreciate the extra point added to that. We have discussed very specifically the portion about proportionality, and I think that was a big discussion with respect to the Church Street. And so, but I think you're right that it isn't a kind of a combination of items in a holistic fashion. I'm not going to read the entire list. The one thing that I am going to kind of mention is accommodate developments with, the improvement of existing sites and buildings that will be developed in a compatible way with surrounding uses. And so one of the things that I actually noted that I didn't necessarily see here, in some of the other PUD ones, we've seen how larger, taller buildings, when you're working against a grade, right? So let's say that it's the grade coming down from Packard and 4th and 5th, coming down to like the Elbel field, for example. We've seen how developments harness the overall grade. We didn't really see that here. And there is a grade difference here, right? So it's coming down from from State and Hill down towards.
There's a minor amount of fall, maybe 5 feet from Packard to State, but nothing like the 4th and 5th.
Oh, sure. Well, when I think of like walking down from the Ford School down to like Hoover, I've also biked up there, so I know for sure.
The north part of it.
Yeah. Right. But I'm kind of talking about the visual plaza as a student's kind of coming down that way, and what are they kind of met with. That student experience is something that I think a lot about. The compatibility with the surrounding uses, I do want to give credit to the comment about the 7 stories. The surrounding buildings, I think the tallest one, if I can recall, is about 5 stories. And so it was particular that we didn't see the comparison of the overall building relative to the other buildings that are kind of nearby. And so I do want to make a minor point that the scaling still does somewhat nag in my mind. But given the housing crisis that we have, as well as the proportionality of things being offered, we have to take that into consideration as well. So overall, what I wanted to say was, from the 17 to the 14, I think this isn't quite as brutal, but that it still does feel somewhat still a little out of scale. But we also know that construction costs are high, and we have to be able to scale in order to make these projects work. So all of that to say, I appreciate everyone's thoughtful comments here. Procedurally speaking, this is a recommendation to City Council, not a site plan by right that is getting approved here. So whatever we vote here is a recommendation. So with that, do I have any other commissioners that want to proffer thoughts, comments? Petitioner as well. Yeah, how about Mr. Moore?
My clients would just like a little clarity from Commissioner Adams' comment. I believe what you're saying is that in order for the supplemental regs to jive with what our clients have discussed, it would have to say auxiliary backup hot water heat, comma, restaurant use, comma, emergency power generation.
Yes.
We would view that as a friendly amendment, or we could just fix it with staff between now and council, whichever you want. We just want to know which one we're supposed to do.
I'm just flagging it. If you want to fix it with staff, go ahead. I'm happy to recommend approval of what you've proposed. But given the comments I heard, I didn't want to let the night go without mentioning that I saw an inconsistency between the uses I was hearing and what was written in the law that will apply to the district.
Planner Leonard.
Yeah, staff's happy to work on that language, but I would like absent a modification to the supplemental regulations, I want to set the stage to make sure that we can represent the Planning Commission's perspective on this change. I am not seeing concern about modifying that language to specifically accept the retail spaces and emergency backup power. So my clarification is if that is not the case, I would suggest that you make a motion to modify that language as you would like to recommend it to the council.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. Would any Commissioner Abrams?
It's not a big enough factor to change my vote, but I just want to log my dissatisfaction with those additions. I was excited coming into this that we were being kind of maybe offered the possibility of an all-electric building, period. And then we're going to leave the table with a maybe all-electric building, except for these three big things. So I don't sense that there, and I heard the petitioner say that he could live with actually no gas in the retail space. But I don't sense from my fellow commissioners that there's an appetite to change that, but I just wanted to voice that.
Thank you. I would entertain other commissioners' thoughts on that matter. Ms. Leo.
I'll just point out that the development agreement is a document where we memorialize offers made by applicants. It serves as both, it reflects needs that are off-site that do not show up on the site plan, and it memorializes offers made in a different sort of development. We do have park contributions that we request. If a developer agrees to provide that, that's where we memorialize it. And then it becomes binding. Note that the developer has offered to contribute $1.6 million, and I can follow up with very specific details, but they have offered to do these particular upgrades. This is not something that shows up in the on the site plan, but they've offered. So I would amend, and this is a late add relative to the draft date of the development agreement. This would be something I would be adding to the development agreement to memorialize the offers. So they've offered, I will hold them to that. Now, this would be, further work needs to, further revisions need to go into the supplemental regulations to allow them to do the gas, to operate for emergency power, emergency generator, or to gas power the restaurant. But I think that you can have some assurance. They've offered to make grid improvements, and we will memorialize that in the development agreement. We can't, I don't think it's fair. I don't think we can require them then to make sure that those improvements come in on time, but I did want to point that out, that there's probably a little more assurance. We can make sure that they facilitate those improvements, and I do want to recognize and give them credit for that. I don't know if we can make sure that they happen in time relative to that, but we can. There is a way to codify that outside of the supplemental regulations.
Ms. DeLeo, just a quick clarification question. There's nothing that I saw in the development agreement with respect to the $1.6 million grid? Is that
No,
intended to be added?
there is not, because
But
the
that is gonna be
development
added.
agreement was written before I knew about this.
Cool. All right,
So
got it.
I would just
Thank you.
say that this would be another offer that they have made, and I would thank them for it, and then add it in to the development agreement.
Okay, understood. Yeah, Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams, right? Okay, I got your right last name. Okay. For doing the detailed reading, like, I came in having read the staff report with the expectation that there were the carve-outs for these couple of things. I am the person who usually says, let us not hook up things to the natural gas lines, because it makes it then harder for us to get off of natural gas, like 100%. Certainly, the addition to the supplemental, or not to the development agreement, gives me a whole bunch more comfort that there is more than a good faith effort being taken to try to make this not as on this. I still, with these carve-outs, I would say this is not sustainability, like, #1 priority, but it's, again, within a suite of things. So I am really personally comfortable changing the supplemental regs to memorialize what's in the staff report, and then adding into the development agreement what we heard here at the table tonight. Like, that's the balance, right? So allowing the supplemental regs to allow for the restaurant cooking and backup generator, but knowing that what we are hearing about the DT contribution is something that is real. I think when we make such changes like this, though, again, I think that this seemed friendly based on what you were saying. I just want to make sure that that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, please, go ahead.
I agree with that. I'm fine putting the working on language to go into that development agreement.
Okay, it's Commissioner Weatherby.
You all set? So I think for me in this case, I want that retail to be successful. And we've had a lot of large apartment buildings where there is no retail tenants. And so whatever we can do to make that retail as successful as possible. Sorry. And yeah, the retail, I want that retail. But also, the gas line goes right by this building. We're not running new gas lines across fields, and like this is just going to be sort of a bloop off the side. So I don't think having some gas here is not as big a deal as as if we were, if it's a electric building with these carve-outs out in a field somewhere. So.
Thank you. So it seems like we are in need of a motion to amend the supplemental regulations to include restaurant cooking or retail space to the exception, yes.
I think the motion is to amend the regulations to include the language from the staff report on page 4, subpart 4 under electric ready building, following the comma, and except for a natural gas emergency backup generator, restaurant cooking, and auxiliary hot water generation, only during periods when demand cannot be met by the available electric supply. That, I think, encompasses the proposal that the petitioner makes and will conform the regulations to their intended use.
Do I have a motion?
Yes, I'll make it.
Do I have a second? Councilmember Dish. We're in discussion of the proposed amendment to include a subsection 4, electric ready building, the addition of, except for a natural gas emergency backup generator, restaurant cooking, and auxiliary hot water generation only during periods where demand cannot be met by the available electric supply, to the regs. Commissioner Abrams.
Weren't we also discussing, is it a different motion, the $1.6 million? That's going to be a separate motion
Yeah,
to
you're
amend?
modifying the supplemental regulations. That's more apropos to the zoning The development agreement actually,
Oh, sorry, I got confused between supplemental regs and development agreement. Never mind.
Any discussion? Commissioner Mills?
I agree with all of that. I would only make a slight amendment that the second half of what's in currently in the supplemental regs, which is not achievable given the capacity of the grid in the area, is the better potential end of the motion. And I don't think that those are incompatible. I think they could be spliced together. I would just say that gets at the idea that, like, hey, we particularly for the backup auxiliary hot water generation, like, that's the thing that you're trying to avoid, right? That's like the $1.6 million is trying to avoid that. The other two will go no matter what, even if DT gets all their ducks in a row. So, yeah.
Okay, staff, do you have clarity on that? Okay, got it. Any other comments?
I don't have any concerns about that.
Okay, got it. Sounds good. Ms. DeLeo, will you, just for the clarification of the commission, will you just read that one section, the amendment language?
I don't have it written down, but I have it in my head. So
okay,
so
gotcha.
I'm going to say it slowly, and we're going to record this.
Yep.
But it would be to amend the supplemental regulations to state that no natural gas connection except for restaurant cooking and emergency backup generator and auxiliary hot water generation only during periods when demand cannot be met by the available electric supply.
Okay. Do we need to do a voice vote, or do we need a roll call vote?
For an amendment, I think a voice vote is fine, and if it gets hard to track, we can move to roll call.
Okay, gotcha. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against? The amendment passes. We're back to the original motion now with respect to the PUD zoning district supplemental regulations, as well as the recommendation that the mayor and city council approve the site plan and development agreement. So any other additional thoughts? Commissioner Mills.
Is this where, should there be a motion for the development agreement that's separate because that's in the second motion? Okay, so if I can move to add the contribution, whatever you want to call it, the $1.6 million to try to make this almost all electric, to the development agreement.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I don't. That's not language that I would suggest you craft, but you direct us to incorporate into the development agreement the memorialization of that
intent,
investment, and intent to work with DTE to achieve that capacity to enable full building electrification.
Thank you for making a much clearer motion.
Does that require a motion or amendment, or is it just a direction that you're getting from us? Just for my edification.
Yeah, I mean, the development agreement ultimately is approved by city council. It's a contract.
Yeah, right.
Honestly, it could go either way, but since the motion was made, I don't think it hurts just to clarify that that's something that you are communicating to the city council, and then when we memorialize it, we can tell them, hey, this was language that the planning commission wanted to see memorialized to follow up on that commitment that the petitioner is making.
Okay. How exactly by which mechanism are you recommending?
I would recommend a motion to modify the development agreement, as Commissioner Mills indicated, that directs staff to add language that includes the commitment of investment in the electric grid, estimated at $1.6 million, to build the adequate electric capacity for this building. If that passes, staff will work with the petitioner to make sure that that language is appropriate. It's going to be a little bit unique because most of our development language is tied to a milestone with the development process. I don't know that we'll be able to do that the same way with this. So just that direction to task us with that crafting of language, then we will communicate that to the city council.
Okay, got it, understood. Is the petitioner friendly to that particular motion to direct staff to work with you on language in the development agreement?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Easy enough. I'm looking for a motion to what we said. Councilmember Dish, second? Need a second? Commissioner Weich, we're in discussion with respect to the motion of what Mr. Leonard said. With respect to directing staff to work with the petitioner regarding the DTE contribution to improve electrical infrastructure and circuits at the church in Willard on that circuit. Any discussion? I'm going to call for a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against? Motion passes. We're back to the original motion. Is it? Yes, as amended twice. Are there any other further final thoughts with respect to this?
I promise it'll be brief.
Commissioner Mills.
I just wanted to let you know, I did do the normal comparison that I do about how the height of this and setbacks compare, and what's in the supplemental regulations is very, very close to what is there, so I don't think that even if this building doesn't go forward, anybody else would have to build something that looks pretty much like this building.
Thank you. Let's go towards a roll call vote.
On the motion as presented with the two amendments first to the supplemental regulations and secondly directing staff to make modifications to the development agreement. Chair Lee.
Yes.
Vice Chair Abrams.
Yes.
Secretary Weich.
Yes.
Councilmember Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
Commissioner Adams.
Yes.
That carries.
Motion carries. Good luck at City Council, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right, with that, we are moving on to other business, which there are none. We're moving on to agenda number 11, which is public comment. This is a second opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about any issue that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. We'll first call on individuals present, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9 if listening by phone or use the raise hander if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634. 1226. City staff will select on callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name if available. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please mute background noises and move to a quiet area so that we can hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to address the commission at this time? Do we have any remote callers?
There are no hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Give it just 3 more seconds. With that, I'll close public comment. We're on to agenda number 12. Is there any commission proposed business? Commissioner Weich.
Just a quick follow-up from my earlier question about churches and the special use exemptions. I was not as clear as I want it to be because I forgot that this is only required in residential or in some of our zoning categories, not in all. So churches require a special exemption across multiple districts, but if they're granted that, like an office, a child care center is automatically permitted by code. So that's what I was trying to clarify was, could the church do the daycare center without the special exemption? And the answer is no, because the dwellings are zoned in R, where they would need the special exception. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other commission proposed business? Yes, Commissioner Mills.
I'm wondering if on our list of potential future things that ORC should consider, we might reference the public comment that we received today and the list of potential changes associated with cooperative housing.
Yeah, we're happy to look into that. One of those was a contribution that I fear might be an impact fee. I don't know that. I haven't researched it yet, but it seemed to be indicated that it was a fee that is required by developments to pay into a fund that has realized a lot of housing. That would, I've got a lot to learn, but my very cursory looking at the description of that suggests to me that it might not be a legally viable tool available here in Michigan. I do think that there's going to be a lot of questions along that through the comprehensive plan process. What recommendations do we want to make about a variety of housing types? You know, the City Council very specifically wants us to look at ways to increase our housing supply and densify, and I think looking at group housing models will be part of that conversation.
Yeah. In particular, I mean, I think it starts with the things that are more squarely in our wheelhouse. Reducing or eliminating minimum lot sizes and square footage requirements. Like, I think that's, again, it's not just for this, and so maybe that's one that we can specifically call out. And also talking about the zones in which this is an allowable use, I think is something also that is part of there. The number of unrelated people in a unit. And then the next two, I think the next one that's on this memo that is what you were talking about, the impact fee, and further the tenant opportunity to purchase. I don't typically see that as something that Planning Commission would do, but it seems a bit to me like it could be a City Council action that's obviously planning adjacent, but that is not a UDC change.
Yeah, I think we brought I think I've addressed this before with the occupancy limits. And that's also something I think that's appropriate for us to talk about with the comprehensive planning process. But I do just want to remind the Commission, our entire regulatory residential scheme is based on that unit. It's not to say that that is the only way that it has to be or that we can't modify it, but I just want to remind that that is how our ordinance is constructed. That definition of family, which is inclusive of occupancy units when we find ways to allow residency that isn't maybe a traditional related family, that is a building block of our scheme of how we regulate housing. So it just as a reminder, totally appropriate conversations to have, I think, with the comprehensive planning process. Going in that direction, depending on the methods that you do, might be very much a drastic restructuring of our ordinance. So I just want to equate those. It's not necessarily just simply going in and striking that or easily adjusting it. That would have a lot of impacts throughout the balance of our ordinance that we just have to be thoughtful about what those are and how we wanted to deal with them.
Yes, Councilmember Dish.
I just want to acknowledge that I think this memo is in some ways a follow-up to the series of conversations that Ms. Kelly, Ms. DeLeo, and I had with the ICC. And I think that there may be interest on council in just having another meeting to review this memo and see if there's anything. I think they tried to reduce their asks, and from their perspective, these are small. From my perspective, from the conversations we had, maybe one of them is small, but some of them are very large. And so it might be helpful before kind of putting it on a ORC or Planning Commission working list, if we could just circle up again and see where we stand following what we had already talked about.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner White.
So, Mr. Leonard, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying if we change Section 516, use-specific standards, subsection 1, residential uses, paragraph A, or title A, residential occupancy, point 2, limits on occupancy of dwelling units, that changes all of the code.
Yes.
If that is the case, can we get some legal advice from our attorney to understand this? Because when I first sat at the table, I asked about this, and it's come up a couple more times. I would love for it to be in our unzoning, but it sounds like you're saying it's an unintended consequence, or it has a tree.
It's not. I don't mean to say it's an unintended. It's a very intended consequence. We every district that we regulate by dwelling units, that is a way that we define what a dwelling unit is. And so I'm not trying to say that you can't eliminate that, but when we say that you have whenever you see anything in our district that is regulated by a density, a number of dwelling units, that's all of our districts, that is based on a dwelling unit. That definition goes to define what we mean by that. Alternately, if we didn't have that, I think one scenario would be to say we don't care. If you have if you are in an R1 zone currently under our current without that definition, it means maybe you could have a 60 bedroom home as opposed to a 4 or 5 bedroom home within that, or 6 bedroom home, depending on what zoning district you're in. And so that was a framework that when our ordinance was crafted, those two things were used combined as they've had an impact on massing, they've had an impact on density of population. And so I don't mean to say that it's not intentional. It's very intentional. In fact, that definition has had repercussions, for better or for worse, across the state, because it is kind of how you define a family can be really challenging from a legal perspective. Ours was sort of the case law that set a lot of that stage. So to eliminate that or modify it, it's just to recognize that has implications to every time you see a number of dwelling units anywhere else in the code. Not that there's not changes. I just want to bring that up. It is very foundational to how, if you were to strike that now, our entire zoning framework would be very different right now in what could be achieved and what can't be achieved.
Yeah, so I think I would like, if it's possible, for us to get either a memo or one of those privileged conversations so that we can understand the implications of this, because
I don't know that it needs to be privileged, but we can.
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and so because I would, to me, when I sat at the table, I was like, "What is this for? Like, why are we trying to keep 6 people as the minimum?" And then we've seen how that's affected development, because then we get these 6-bedroom units that got developed to fit the standard because of where it is. And so if we can get some guidance on this that is more than, that would really help us understand how it would impact our code.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Leo.
Yeah, I do want to mention, I think the right solution, we can follow up with that as well. I think, though, the right solution is to sit down again with the Student Cooperative Council. I think their heart is absolutely in the right place, and I agree with their goals, but they are not interpreting the zoning ordinance correctly. And if you look down, same page, the occupancy standards do not apply to group housing, fraternities or sororities, student cooperative housing, emergency shelters, or convalescent homes. So they have it's worth part of my assignments and responsibilities is to make sure that everyone understands the zoning parameters, especially before you suggest changes. I don't think that the solution to their ask is their suggestion, but we can still help them meet their goals.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. I'm just going to make one clarification on the record for one of my comments that I said during the Apple Play Care discussion, which was I had said, hey, it's possible for you to also petition for the special exception use. I just wanted to make on the record clearly that what I was referring to was one of the criteria for approval because of the allegations that it would be detrimental to the economic value. And I was simply trying to clarify that I wasn't necessarily 100% convinced that that was factual based on kind of what was being said. So I want to just on the record clarify that. Aside from that, any other commission proposed business? Seeing none, I'm going to move to adjournment. Seconded by Commissioner Weiss. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thanks.